We don't do advertising.
You know, I would never would have done if I were like a Hennepin County pastor. That's not like, yesterday you had all the leaders walking on after the last $800 billion stimulus, and all the folks who just had a different branded mask on, and all the Germans just had on like straight up N95s, you know? It's like,
The meeting of the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners is now called to order. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Fretham,
Here.
Mattis Castillo,
Here.
McDonough,
Here.
McGuire, McGuire,
Kidding me? Can you not hear me?
yes.
I can hear you,
yes.
and she said here. If you could take a proxy.
I'm here.
Yep.
I'm here.
I hear
Can you
you.
not hear me in the board chamber?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Oh.
Ortega,
aye.
Reinhardt,
Here.
Carter,
Here. And we'll all mute while Commissioner Fretham leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. The agenda of July 21st is before you for approval. Is there a motion in the second?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Any discussion on the agenda? If not, will the clerk please call the roll?
Fretham,
Aye.
Mattis Castillo,
Aye.
McDonough,
Aye.
McGuire,
Aye.
Ortega,
You have to be off mute.
Aye.
thank you. Reinhardt,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye. Thank you very much. Let's see, that was the agenda or the minutes. Did we do the minutes too this time? Let's do the minutes. All right, thank you. So the minutes of our July 14th meeting are also before you. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion on the minutes? If not, clerk, please call the roll.
Fretham,
Aye.
Mattis Castillo,
Aye.
McDonough,
Aye.
McGuire,
Aye.
Ortega,
Aye.
Reinhardt,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye. And now our COVID-19 update. I'll call on Ramsey County Manager Ryan O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Good morning, members. I'll turn it over to Director of Public Health, Kathy Hadeen, to get us going.
Thank you, County Manager O'Connor, and thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Our data dashboard is being updated due to the Minnesota Department of Health moving over to a new data system, so we won't be showing it this morning. But a big thank you to Sue Mitchell and Suzanne Stensovelo from Public Health for manually mining the data to help me provide this update for you all today. We hope to have the dashboard back up in the next few days. We're also looking to expand the data that we have on our dashboard to help us tell more of a complete story of what's going on in our community. One way we can do this is by providing the positivity rate, which I've explained here in the past. As of last week, in Minnesota, the percentage of people who tested positive out of the total number of people tested was at 5%. In a perfect space where there are enough tests and people have access to tests, 3% would suggest that we kind of have things a little bit under control. 5% or higher puts us into a category of caution and suggests there's more people out there with COVID than we're able to test or manage. In Ramsey County, our positivity rate is 8.4%, which tells us we have more infection and spread of COVID than across the state. And as we dive deep and be able to tell the story within specific racial and ethnic demographics, we're going to see that we're likely to have higher positivity rates within those communities. So here's the additional COVID situation update in Minnesota and Ramsey County. In Minnesota, 47,107 people have tested positive for COVID-19. We're still seeing an increase in cases each day. Total cases requiring hospitalization to date is 4,678. Hospitalized as of yesterday was 247, and in the ICU we have 115. Both of those numbers are remaining steady. Unfortunately, 1,545 people have died from COVID across the state, with 1,187 in our long-term care settings. Within Ramsey County, the cases continue to increase, with 5,812 people who have tested positive for COVID, and that's an increase of 457 from last week, which is actually a larger increase from the week before. Total cumulative cases requiring hospitalization in our county is 788, with 244 who have been in the ICU. And again, unfortunately, 249 people have lost their lives to COVID across the county, and that totals 13 this month in July. Of the 5,812 cases, 32% are white, 23% are Asian, 19% are Black, 12% unknown, 10% other, 4% multiracial, and we now have 24 cases within the American Indian community. Total approximate number of completed tests in our state is 867,410. Again, we have the capacity to do at least 20,000 tests a day. You can get this information from our data dashboard by going to www.ramseycounty.us/coronavirus. And again, that will be the data will be back up and running in the next couple of days. I will reserve the rest of my COVID update for later in today's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Madam Chair, and just to be clear, so we have the link here for individuals who may be watching or watching the video later. The conversation later about racial equity and racism and its impact on broader public health and other systems across our organization clearly has magnified impacts on COVID-19. And so we'll hear more and discuss the importance of the connections between the current pandemic and 400 years of history as we go through today's agenda. On a few more updates related to the COVID-19 update, on Friday, a group of Ramsey County leaders convened with the city administrators across Ramsey County to discuss implementation of CARES Act funding. Here in Ramsey County, our plan, which you've all been a part of, authorizing as we've gone, involving workforce, small business, individual and family financial assistance, racial equity and community engagement, homelessness, and we talked about mobile testing capability through public health. The goal was to present the broad array of work occurring across Ramsey County's operations to expend its CARES Act allocation in ways that put the money out in the community to those most in need, and then see if we have city partners who, now that they have received money from the state legislature and are looking at the best ways to be a part of the collective support to their communities, to see if there are opportunities to partner together in this work. We did not ask on Friday for a yes or a no on that response, and so I can come back in future weeks and share more as we learn more. Friday was about a 90-minute opportunity to lay out our goals and objectives that you have authorized through previous board actions, to talk about the amounts of spending and the plans for disbursement, and we will see where that goes. Already received some nice emails back from city administrators who participated, thanking Ramsey County for the willingness to open up and share our information and create opportunities for hopeful collective action across our communities as we fight this pandemic together. The resources, a couple more points on this topic. The resources that were shared during the meeting will be posted on our COVID-19 website. They're also being sent out along with a link to the full Zoom meeting, if anyone would like to watch that. Those are being sent out via email to the city administrators as a follow-up item today or tomorrow. I will make sure you receive all those information materials as well. As I know that the Ramsey County League of Local Governments started this conversation around collective action and asks, the PAG subcommittee, the Policy Action Group subcommittee related to financing is a place where we'll be able to hopefully track seeing and learning more about how cities and the counties have a collective response together so that information can be used with the League of Local Governments, at the legislature, in Ramsey County, in future board meetings, et cetera. Yesterday, county staff in the key areas I just referenced for our CARES Act spending met with myself and the CFO to talk about our key spending. I just wanted you to know we have monthly meetings right now scheduled in August and September to check in on the rate of expenditure as we execute significant numbers of contracts and implement new programs across those various areas. We want to ensure that we expend every available dollar on the timelines that have been laid out by the federal guidelines for the end of this year. And spending $96 million is both an opportunity and there come with it challenges. So we continue to make sure we stay on top of the spending. I want to thank staff leadership from all the various areas leading the CARES Act implementation for being a part of that conversation, continuing to highlight when we will know if we are on target as we move forward. And the good news is, particularly in the area of small business assistance, where that first round has already gone out, we have many millions already out in the community helping individuals. In the area of workforce, you heard just last week about the 100+ contracts going out to many community partners as a part of that work. We are now more than 20% of the way to those contracts being fully executed, which allows money to begin to flow into the community through services there. On the financial assistance side, the expectation is that the moratorium, the governor's executive order that prevents evictions, the moment that lifts, we anticipate a potential surge in financial need. And so we've been working to try to both be ready for that moment, as well as working with families and individuals now, trying to engage on the forefront. But we have key markers of knowing when these moments may appear with that particular money, and we're ready to spend as well. And in homelessness, we've been talking a lot about it, and we have an RBA on request for board action on today's agenda that further expends and clarifies homelessness spend through the end of 2020 as it relates to our CARES Act funding. I'll finally just end with a note about the county's overall budget. I think it's a continued question that I receive. I would assume many of you receive it as well, about what is the current state of the Ramsey County operating budget for 2020. Not talking about planning for 2021 at this moment, but we continue to hear and read about municipalities and organizations, both locally and nationally, who are in very tough budgetary moments. And make no mistake, we face the same budgetary pressures and challenges as other organizations. In our check-in last Friday with the CFO and continuing to review the budget, what I just want to note is that I feel confident right now about our ability to continue to manage this year through the pandemic. There are a ton of unknowns. I don't want to make overly broad prescriptions, but because of immediate actions that were taken around ensuring that on the personnel side, we controlled costs as vacancies became available and only allowed for hiring into the most emergency-related needs, by ensuring that we focused resources into the incident management response first and the related needs to support community through a pandemic, but we're far more conservative than in other areas that would have normally moved forward in a normal year. It positions us well for the second half of this year. And I'm comfortable reporting that to you today because I think that's an important part of our ongoing trust and accountability, is both how we manage this year while we also plan for 2021. And since a lot of people continue to ask about how does this year's budget look, I would say it looks good. It looks like we have the flexibility to manage through the next 6 months. And I thank the county board for their continued leadership and support in that space that has enabled us to be successful. With that, Madam Chair, we'll stand for any questions related to the COVID-19 update that you or your colleagues may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your update. I do see a couple of questions immediately. Commissioner Fretham.
Thank you, Chair Carter. Kathy, those numbers are really concerning about the positivity rate here in Ramsey County. I'm wondering, I know we discussed last week and our lack of authority to do anything broader than the mask measure on our agenda today. Is there anything else, any other measures that we as the Board of Commissioners could be taking proactively to head off what appears to be a coming second surge here in Ramsey County? It is important that we as elected officials are really listening to the experts like you in this. And so I'm asking you, what more could we be doing right now?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Fretham, I'm going to take the first shot at answering the question regarding board authority pieces. If you have specifics around public health approaches or ways in which the board can continue to reinforce best public health practices, I would leave that to Director Hadeen to help answer. The policy today about county-owned facilities and property is one of the steps along the way. I would highlight that there are opportunities, should the board want to pursue, related to ordinances that could extend further than simply county-owned properties. Last week when we were talking about the policy side and we were clarifying what the board can and can't do, there was some level of confusion. I apologize for that, for articulating it in a way that led to that confusion. The county board does have authority to pass ordinances that could extend beyond its own property spaces, and there's a process by which we could do that. Today's step is one step in a broader conversation that the county board could choose to have. That would probably be the most aggressive policy-related measure that the board could take. But the other part is, as leaders in this community who partner and work deeply with members of the community and other leaders across this community, the opportunity to reinforce public health best practices, connect people with resources, ensure the advocacy for additional resources to come our way. Those actions are significant as well and should not be discounted when we think about formal versus other types of actions that could be taken.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Commissioner Matas-Castillo.
Great, thank you. On the same lines of the positivity rates, Director Hadeen, is there any more planned walk-up or weekend testing sites? I know I've been asked by community members about where they can get tested, and our website is up to date, but most of them are clinics that are in normal working hours, which makes it difficult for people to get there. You also have to have an appointment currently, which is a very long hold time on the phone. I personally tried to make an appointment for my husband who had been exposed, and it was very difficult. So I'm just wondering if there's any more planned walk-up testing sites like we had last month.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Matas-Castillo, thanks for the question. Yeah, and I agree. I think that's another way to tell like how many people are sick based on how long it takes you to get an appointment to get tested. 3 weeks ago when I had my son tested, we were in and out within a day and results came back in less than 12 hours. So it just kind of depends. For us, we are working on a 4-tiered plan for how we will provide testing opportunities for people in community. We are finalizing that plan now, and the plan works to partner with MDH, or Minnesota Department of Health, as well as our community clinics, as well as us doing a majority of the testing clinics on our own. We're also looking into the opportunity of possibly purchasing Metro Transit buses and retrofitting them in partnership with Minnesota Department of Health to be able to offer an infrastructure for testing throughout the winter months as well, because a bus can offer that heat to keep people warm while they're in that space. It can offer a one-way in and a one-way out as well for managing traffic. So we, I would say, are a few weeks away from getting going. Multiple metro counties are in the same space as working with the Minnesota Department of Health to figure out how to take on more of that responsibility so that we can be more responsive to the community needs in real time. Thanks for the question.
Thank you very much. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question is along the same lines of the increase in cases, and I appreciate my colleagues' questions. I am wondering, is this the beginning of a surge? I was thinking the surge might come more in the fall, that this is just, is this a case of more people being outside and just being in contact? Because I'm just curious if there's a sense of where there increase. I was hoping there'd be more of a decrease in the summer and then expecting the increase in the fall when people would be inside. But am I thinking of this incorrectly? Are we just seeing more and more people getting more relaxed about what they're doing?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, I'm with you. I wish that we were in a space of continuing to see a decrease in cases, but people are comfortable being around one another right now. It's easy to forget. It's lovely outside, with the exception of a rainy day here and there. You know, people have come together for 4th of July celebrations. They come together on the weekends. They hang out, and we're learning more and more too about how COVID is spread and how far COVID can reach in the air and how it can be aerosolized. So, you know, it's hard for me to say if this is a surge. I think we're still tracking the data to see that maybe we're seeing more hills and valleys at this point. Most experts are saying we are still in our first wave. So it's hard to tell, I think, but what we need to continue to keep doing is social distancing, at least 6 feet, wearing a mask when you're in public and in any type of public spaces around other people, and you can't keep that distance even if you're outside. So continuing to promote those messages of social distancing. Our community liaisons and outreach staff, in partnership with our research team, the racial equity and community engagement team, handed masks out to McCarran's, am I saying that correctly? Thank you. Park, as well as Lake Phelan this weekend, because as you know, it was a very beautiful weekend, and lots of people have been out at our beaches. And so community outreach staff have been out and about providing reusable cloth masks to make sure that people have those.
Thank you. I really appreciate you doing that, because we all see people outside in large groups that perhaps are not being as careful. And so I appreciate you doing that at the parks. Thank you for those comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ortega.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I quite didn't get what is the rate for the Hispanic community on COVID? I didn't hear any.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Ortega, thank you for the question. I can pull up that data, and if I can grab it while we're here today, I can provide it to you. I don't have it off the top of my head. I think maybe you've even seen some of the data that came from Minnesota Community Care that is showing outrageous numbers of, upwards of 29% positivity rates within the Latinx community. And so some of our communities are certainly being hit harder than others around COVID-19, which is why we need to continue to message, work with our trusted messengers, work with our media messengers, and work with our community liaisons, as well as providing more testing sites for people to have access to that they will trust in our communities.
Yes. Could you look that up and let me know? And I think we need to get that figure reported. The research I saw was 50% increase. So I don't know how that correlates to the overall increase we're seeing in the total population. But I would like to have those numbers now reported. I really don't care what the categories are for the health department or the CDC. I think for us, we need to know exactly what's going on in that community. Because I know the breakdowns don't fit in very, very neatly in terms of the whole race thing. And that's going to be an issue in the Hispanic community because we're probably not tracking it.
Thank you very much for that question, Commissioner. That will be an issue for all of us. And we do appreciate ensuring that that data will be reported consistently. We'd all like to hear back on that. Thank you. I am looking and I do not have additional hands. Commissioner for them? All right.
I'd just like to follow up. Thank you, County Manager O'Connor, for responding to my initial question, and I hope we can have further discussion on the potential for moving forward with a more forceful mask mandate. I am concerned that as the legislature potentially adjourns without completing a bonding bill, that it will be continue that it might continue to be held as a political football and prevent a statewide mask mandate, and that right now we seem to have a patchwork of mask mandates across Ramsey County, which is confusing for citizens, and that if one thing we could do for our public health to protect our citizens is to prevent a patchwork across Ramsey County, is to move forward with an ordinance. That's something I think we should be looking at, especially if the public health science supports that. And so that's why I look to our public health director to provide us that information about what we could be doing within our authority to put forward good science and good policy. So whatever we could do, and I appreciate that there are things beyond policy that we could be doing, and I think all of us are pushing forward with sharing with our constituents resources and information, and I know I have been pushing out that information, but information is not necessarily working right now, and we could be helping supporting our cities, right, with a more comprehensive approach to the work that they're doing in their city council halls by preventing this patchwork from happening. So that's what I would like to know more about, and if we could have our public health guidance pushing forward those science-based solutions and initiatives, I would appreciate that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Fretham, just one short comment on that. I will listen for any additional direction that the board wants to provide today during the request for board action related to the countywide policy and steps forward. That would seem like a potential logical extension that the board may want to consider, and so I'll listen for that piece there. Secondly, I want to make sure we are unambiguous on one point. I believe Director Hadeen would fully agree. We would support the idea of more aggressive action that sets a broader tone for the idea that mask wearing matters. There are always concerns around enforcement, particularly when we see disparate rates of mask usage and disparate rates of infection among different populations, as we've talked about this morning. That would need to be thoughtful. And that patchwork regulatory environment that extends beyond Ramsey County to the broader region is a part of it. And so I just want to highlight that from the science perspective, very much agree. There are some other questions there that we may talk about, even some today during this request for board action, that I'll continue to listen for, and then we'll follow up accordingly after today's meeting. So thank you for your words.
Thank you. And we do have that before us, so we'll be sure to express our thoughts and provide direction during that discussion. I want to call on Commissioner Reinhardt.
Yeah. When you mentioned, Director Hadeen mentioned that at both McCarran's and Lake Phalen that we handed out cloth masks to people. When we did that, what happened? Did people take them? Did they use them?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Reinhardt, I was not there. I will get you that report next week, but what I believe would happen is they did take them. We have not had any issues thus far when providing PPE and providing cloth masks that people don't want them. So we are finding that people are taking them. It's difficult. You know, I've been around beaches and I am noticing clusters of people. So it looks like families are social distancing to the best of their ability. So as long as they were outside and, you know, away from others, they wouldn't necessarily need to have put them on right away, but people are absolutely accepting them.
Okay, well, and I think that's important because we've heard things from other parts of the country, especially where there's so much resistance. So, but it appears that even at the national level that there's more and more following of that very logical and easy step to take of wearing a mask. So hopefully that will continue and people will understand that, I mean, we are going to have we're going to have a surge, whether this one is it or not. Actually, we'll have probably more than that. I think all the commissioners have commented on the fact that when we get into the actual flu season, this is going to get much worse. So, I mean, we're just simply trying to do the right thing for everyone involved. So hopefully people will understand that. And in restaurants and different things right now, I know that there's kind of a patchwork of who's actually following the rules. And I think mostly from what I've heard anyhow, it's the patrons within it trying to make sure that it's understood that they need to. And I think it's also great, there are a lot of other areas. I noticed that with the YMCA, and I'm assuming other gyms as well, they put in pretty strict rules about what you can do and what you cannot do, including you can't drink from their fountains. You can fill up your water bottle from the fountains. The 6 feet, there's all kinds of things that have been put in place that are really meant to ensure the health and safety of everyone. And so I think that having been part of a Chamber of Commerce event now probably about a week and a half ago, I was really impressed with the restaurant owners and the other businesses that were coming forward and saying, this is about our employees and trying to get people back to work, because if they're afraid to come back to work, that doesn't help them either. So it seems like there's more of a movement now than there has been before on just doing the right thing and wearing the mask, and the sometimes the spacing is more difficult, but if you have a mask, that's a huge step forward. A very simple thing to do, as we all know. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt. Commissioner McDonough.
Thanks, Chair Carter. I just a couple comments on the potential here for a countywide ordinance on masks. I think we need to make sure we have some information here to make sure we have a good conversation. I know, and I don't recall, I think Shoreview, but at least 1 or 2 cities just did it last night. I know a number of Ramsey County cities have already done it. I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure, but they seem to be using the same template that Edina used, one of the first cities that did it, so that there is consistency within ordinances. And so I want to get a good sense, because I think residents are much more receptive the more local those decisions are made. There was a lot of positivity around the way White Bear Lake did theirs and how they really focused. And so I want to get a sense here, is this really needed for us to even do and put effort into if our cities are really taking care of that on their own here in Ramsey County? Because the sense I have here is actually most of our larger cities have already done this, and maybe even getting the sense of who's next and what cities are actually taking a look at it. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And once again, we do have an item on the agenda, so we will be able to share additional information this morning on that. And while it would take additional research to create a stronger mandate for a mask across our county outside of county facilities, we do know that we are in conversation with our cities. And just as with our funding examples, our cities are calling on us for those examples and willing to work with us in planning theirs. I would hope that in the mandate for mask that we are about to, if in fact we pass this resolution today, that we're about to pass, they would also be willing to work with us in that regard. But we'll hold out for our discussion during this particular resolution to complete. Thank you very much, Commissioner McDonough. I have Commissioner Ortega's hand still. Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn it back over then to County Manager O'Connor for a wrap up of our COVID update.
Madam Chair, I'm going to go back to Director Hedin briefly to give an update on the Latino numbers. Director Hedin looked them up.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Sure. Madam Chair, Commissioner Ortega, because the state website is redoing their data and how they're showing it, and there's a lag to us, I can't give you the positivity rate, but what I can give you is the case per 100,000 residents. And Latinx community is seeing the highest number across the state of Minnesota with 3,120 per 100,000 residents. And so for Latinx Minnesotans who are testing positive, they're testing positive at nearly 15 times the rate as white Minnesotans. So I do want to put that on the record for you, and we'll provide more positivity rates per racial and ethnic demographics as we have the ability to manipulate the new data software.
Thank you, Kathy. And Madam Chair, just to wrap up, as we listened last week and had the conversation, thanks to public health staff and communications in support of that, we are working on really bringing this positivity rate conversation front and center, both on the macro Ramsey County level in comparison to the state and the region, but also then broken down by demographic information, because we do know that the rate of spread and the incidence of spread is very different in different parts of this community. It's important for us to keep saying that. And when we stepped back and said, what is the headline number that will best guide us, a green, yellow, and red assessment looking at those rates of positivity and the growth or decreases in those areas is a very important measure that helps us to better understand this slow-moving, long-standing piece. I'll end with one final comment when I mentioned long-standing and slow-moving. In conversations with employees and labor groups over the last number of weeks, one of the questions that has come up repeatedly is the duration of the emergency period. How long will the emergency period last? You know, it doesn't feel every day like an emergency everywhere. And I just want to go back on the record briefly by saying part of the emergency period is the bureaucratic response to how we track, document, spend, and the authorizations provided by the board during this period. It's not meant to say every moment is like a burning house or a tornado coming through a community, but it's a slow-moving glacial event of global proportion that we're facing. And that's challenging for us all to get our heads around. Interestingly, that conversation about the bureaucratic side of an emergency response has been helpful in many cases for individuals asking and trying to better understand why the emergency period continues, whether cases have been lower or higher. And so I just wanted to bring that back up as a question that I sometimes get. I would imagine many of you also get it. We take seriously the moment when government declares an emergency and what that can connotate, and never a light piece to that. And ultimately, just to end by saying it is our goal to follow regular county procedures, practices, policies at every turn possible, and only use emergency authorizations through the notification processes and approvals as outlined by the board's resolutions in the moments when there are no other options in front of us due to timelines or immediate need. With that, Madam Chair, that concludes the COVID-19 update.
Thank you very much. I do continue to have two hands up. I need to just double check in with Commissioner Ortega, Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to state that while I definitely want the numbers regarding the Latino community, my question is that I also want the information I want as I read the research is we're having a surge. Is that surge due to the Hispanic community, number one? Or is there a correlation there? And then the other thing is, what, if anything, are we doing that's differently? Because my initial gut says then the community clinics are not doing what we thought they could do. And do we have to do something different? Because if that is part of the surge, then we need to, just from a public health perspective, we need to address where that surge is coming from. So I don't know, I'm asking all the questions, so I just don't want a number. The number doesn't mean anything if it's not in context. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And certainly to guide our responses, we need that kind of information, but then to be sure that we are targeting and working in community as needed. Appreciate it. I'm going to check in with Commissioner Reinhardt.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. In addition to that, I know that we did get some information, follow-up information from a couple of weeks ago regarding ages, because that is another changing demographic here from what I understand with now with children and infant dying, and the younger, the ages are going down I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but there are younger and younger people that are getting it and dying from it. And so I think that that's going to also be an important thing because, you know, when you're young, you think you're invincible. And so I think that we're, you know, showing that data is going to be helpful for people to understand that this is not something that, that just because of your age or where you live or your background, that somehow you can not be impacted by this because it's going to be across the community. Some more, in some areas more than others. But I think it would be important to have the information about what is happening with the ages of people as we go forward as well, so that we can share that information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And looking over our hands, I believe that all questions on the COVID update have been asked. I want to say thank you again to County Manager O'Connor and to Director Kathy Hedin for the report today, for the ongoing work in COVID response where health and safety and wellness are concerned. And look forward to the additional information that you'll be resourcing as we continue our work on testing infrastructure to ensure that we are back on the data dashboard next week. And as we are seeing increasing positivity and need to better understand what may be available to us as we guide our responses for the future. And with that, I'd like to ask for a brief moment of silence as we continue to recognize this emergency in our midst. Its increasing impacts upon all of us in our community and struggle to manage to, in response, the elimination of this crisis. Thank you. Thank you very much for that moment. And with that, we'll move on to the balance of our agenda. We have the administrative items before us. Commissioner Fretham.
Yes, I would like to move item 6, social services, sole source agreement with Nexus Facts Family Healing for training and consulting services. I would like to move item 7, workforce solutions, appointment to the Workforce Innovation Board. I would like to move item 8, finance department, funding adjustments for the Ramsey County COVID-19 homelessness response.
Second.
Sorry about that. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the 3 items that are on our administrative agenda? Lacking that, I'll call on the clerk to please call the roll.
Fretham.
Aye.
Matas Castillo.
Aye.
McDonough.
Aye.
McGuire.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Carter.
Aye. So the administrative items have passed, and we are now on our policy agenda. I'll call on the county manager for the countywide racial equity policy and addressing the ongoing impacts of racism in Ramsey County.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this is an important topic. I want to share the piece here on the introduction with a number of important leaders across Ramsey County who will come up and introduce themselves as we go. There have been a lot of organizations and local jurisdictions taking various actions related to racism as a public health crisis, a public health emergency, the role of racism more broadly, and the impacts that it has. And I think what we sought to do through the request for board action in front of you after the dialogue we have had with you over past weeks that actually started last summer as we presented the administrative racial equity policy for Ramsey County was an ask from the county board to build a policy that would apply to elected officials as well and bring that before the Board of Commissioners. That's a part of today's action. And then the second part is around addressing the ongoing impacts of racism in Ramsey County, which clearly extends beyond our borders as a 4,000 person organization to the broader community that involves 500,000 people. And I thank you for the forum and the conversation today for this discussion to happen. I thank all of our staff who are a part of today's presentation and the many, many others who have been a part of this work leading up to today. And I also just want to say thank you to the community who has been side by side as we continue our work. They continue to hold us to account. They continue to push us to drive further. And they continue to remind us that we're not seeking a specific point in time, but an ongoing, committed, trusting, transparent process that leads to equitable outcomes for every individual in this community, regardless of the color of one's skin. With that, I'm going to turn it to Director of Public Health, Kathy Hadeen, to share a few words.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, I'm going to take us through a timeline that barely begins to illustrate racism as a public health crisis, as an emergency, as an issue. From 1619 to 1730, Africans were enslaved, brought to this land, treated as property, and received very little medical treatment. In the 1830s, scientific racism was born in this country when scholars at the time claimed physical and mental differences between Black and white people, supporting the notion of white superiority. In the mid-1800s, Surgeon James Marion Sims, the father of modern gynecology, practices medical techniques on enslaved Black women without anesthesia or consent, perpetuating a theory that Black people were less than human. In 1899, sociologist and activist W.E.B. Du Bois cites that health outcomes are more related to what we know now as social determinants of health rather than genetics. That was back in barely 1900. 1930s to 1970s, a 4-decade-long, well-known study known as the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, enacted by the United States Public Health Service, knowingly allowed Black men to suffer from syphilis and lied to many of them, telling them they didn't have the disease when in fact they did, all in the name of science. When a treatment for syphilis became available, it was not provided to the men in order to allow the scientists to see what would happen. These men ended up passing syphilis onto their partners and their children and eventually died from a curable disease. It took until 1997 when descendants of the study's participants were paid $10 million for the mistreatment of their family members, and President Bill Clinton offered a formal apology to the victims on behalf of the United States government. Throughout history, some of which recent, medical experimentation was done on Blacks and people of color. In 1951, a now well-known Henrietta Lacks died of cervical cancer. Ms. Lacks's cancer cells, known as HeLa cells, have the ability to reproduce unlike any other cells scientists had seen. These cells were taken from Ms. Lacks without her consent or the permission of her children and have been used to help develop a polio vaccine and aid to cancer and AIDS research. Again, in 1952, Federal Security Administrator Oscar Ewing concluded that health disparities between BIPOCs, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and whites were due largely in part to social and political determinants of health, citing people were in unpleasant, hazardous, and least rewarding jobs. They were living with low income, living in crowded communities. They had a lack of quality, affordable hospital care, and no hospital care at all. This was 1952. In the 1950s, the American highway transportation system tore through communities of color and displaced so many families without fairly compensating them for their homes. We know this too well in the Rondo community and the North End here in Ramsey County. Something changed in the 1960s. Policy changes were made. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, which brought hospital desegregation, voting rights bills, new Medicare and Medicaid programs, and provided increase in overall health for African Americans and POCs for the next 10 years. After a short-lived increase in health outcomes in the 1960s and 70s, the racial and health disparity gap grew to grow between Blacks, Indigenous, POCs, and whites. In 2008, the American Medical Association apologized to the National Medical Association, which was a society for African American physicians, for the harm the association and its leaders had done to the African American community and physicians by actively working against them to keep them out of the American Medical Association. The AMA voted against universal health care repeatedly since the group's inception in the 1800s. When it comes to bias and long-held beliefs, a 2016 study of white medical students from the National Academy of Sciences found that half of white medical professionals held a belief that Blacks hold a higher threshold of pain, which led to differences in pain treatment and pain management, causing undertreatment and more suffering and perpetuating inaccurate views of Black people, biology, and treatment. Today, Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color suffer higher rates of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, and death. Black people, unfortunately, are living sicker and dying quicker than whites. Chronic stress, an outcome of racism, leads to accelerated aging and earlier onset of adverse health conditions. In a 2005 study, Surgeon General David Satcher said that if African Americans died at the same rate as whites, an estimated 83,000 lives would be saved per year, and attributed those additional deaths to systemic racism. It's important to say that Black people, Indigenous people, Asian, and Latinx who suffer from higher rates of disease are not inherently less healthy. This is not about making the right choices or not working hard enough, but it's about what enduring racism does to one's body and mental well-being over hundreds and hundreds of years. It's also about how decisions that were made at a policy level for hundreds of years affected Black people. As we know, where you live has a greater role in your health outcome than your genes. Social and political determinants of health provide the conditions in which we all live. Your income matters, your education matters, whether or not you have adequate or healthy housing matters, being able to vote matters. Living in a toxic-free environment matters. Having quality water matters. Having options to good transportation matters. Living in a safe neighborhood matters. When you get a chance, go online to Ramsey County, www.ramseycounty.us, and search public health plans and click on the 2017 Health Equity Data Analysis and see how racism directly connects to racial and health equity here in Ramsey County. Racism has everything to do with the COVID-19 disparities we are seeing with the Black, Indigenous, people of color communities across the country and across our county. Specifically in our community of Ramsey County, Blacks, Asian, and Latinx, as we just had a discussion about, are suffering higher rates of infection and, when adjusted for age, higher rates of death than whites. Infection rates and positivity rates are higher in these communities because there's more exposure. There's more exposure because BIPOCs are overrepresented in jobs like food processing plants, factories, healthcare, grocery, and restaurant workers. BIPOCs are more likely to live within unstable housing or within proximity to one another and likely to take public transportation more. And BIPOCs are dying at higher rates because of the higher rates of chronic diseases and have less access to healthy foods, live in neighborhoods that lack investment in parks, street lights, slower traffic, and less industry allowing for active living. Because of historical trauma, people are less likely to go to the doctor or trust the medical system. Historical data provided earlier provides insight into what trauma exists within these communities. Racism is and always has been a public health crisis, and everyone needs to play a part in solving this issue. Racism is a systemic issue, an all-hands-on-deck issue. As we move forward, we must value all who live in our community. We must recognize the past and name the injustice, and we must invest in resources. And I'll turn it over and welcome Elizabeth Tolzman, Maria Sarabia, Sarah Hawley, and Prince Corbett up to focus on what we will be working on next to address these issues.
Thank you very much. As we call up the speakers, I'd just like to make certain that we get a motion to get this item on the table for discussion moving forward.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. There is a motion and a second. And We appreciate the words that you just spoke, Director Hadeen. They were poignant for the moment in recognizing this ongoing and enduring crisis, and also appreciate other speakers who are here now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll turn it over to Maria Sarabi.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hadeen, for very powerful words. It's an honor to present today. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'll only take a few moments to acknowledge a couple of things here. This journey has been a very long journey, and I want to emphasize the intersectionality, which calls for collective responsibility and collaboration for us to address racism. Intersectionality, some of you may know I have a cross-cutting background. I've moved around a bit, even in the 3 years that I've been here with Ramsey County. But I want to be clear that I stand here today in front of you as a representative of the Human Resources Department. This speaks to the intersectionality of our work of advancing racial and health equity, addressing social and political determinants of health, and positive health outcomes. Our institutions, this state, Ramsey County, was founded on the premise of racist ideals and a racial hierarchy. We are here to undo harms from the past and build for a better future for our grandchildren, children, great-grandchildren, so race will no longer be a predictor for life outcomes. The legacy of racialized abuses of power still stays with us today. The way we speak about this within Human Resources, we've leveraged our Learning and Development Center, where I oversee a small shop of just 8 staff who have stood up remote learning, revamped virtual learnings and trainings, hosted talking circles after the murder of George Floyd, and we've enhanced new employee orientation to include this historical context of racism and the role of government. And we also weave in the requirements of serving here at Ramsey County, a public institution, where we promote and inform employees about the requirements around non-discrimination, workplace safety, violence prevention, as well as sexual harassment, and COVID-19 safety and prevention training. We know our rich diversity is an asset for Ramsey County residents and workforce. We do all of this with the aim for all employees to feel welcomed and experience a sense of belonging, and yet our work continues. In closing, I'll state that much is underway within our talent attraction, retention, and promotion TARP efforts as well. You will hear more details around that in an upcoming board workshop. But I also want to highlight that this policy was co-created with employees and communities. It represents the intersectionality and shared responsibilities of advancing racial equity. Acknowledging racism has been a long-standing root cause for our racially and ethnically diverse communities and families. There are a few bullet points within the policy that we're presenting today that I would like to elevate that connect directly to HR and my role as working in the diversity, inclusion, organizational development team, and then working across the organization with all of the folks that stand here today. Provide ongoing regular racial equity trainings to increase awareness. That hopefully will spark action. Include voices of historically underrepresented communities in policy and program discussions. Elevate racial equity in our legislative initiatives and priorities. Address reports of racist behavior and practices when they are made internally and with the public. Be supportive, welcoming, and stop conditions that create inequities. And value and commit to diversify workforce, modernize job classifications and career pathways, and enhancing hiring processes.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Madam Chair, we have one more speaker. I'm going to invite Sarah Holliday to close the staff portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Ryan. Madam Chair, Commissioners, Ryan. As a county, we still have a long way to go on this journey of recognition, reconciliation, and repair. Historically, we have not been intentional about centering community voice. We have not always held ourselves accountable when community members and groups make recommendations to the county that they expect to see change. We have not always been intentional about keeping community updated on our progress after engaging with them. Most importantly, we have not always addressed the despair caused by the continuation of longstanding history, structures, practices, and the impact of racism, which has long been a most significant predictor of outcomes with people who are Black, African American, ADOS, American Indian, and other racially and ethnically diverse communities. As a result, we need to continue to address the deepest, most entrenched issues first that are driven by inequitable policies, practices, processes, and procedures that are the root cause of despair in communities. We need to continue to work alongside community to identify priority areas, outcomes that are community-led, monitored, and resourced. We need to promote the community engagement master contract opportunity with more culturally diverse vendors ensuring their contracts are executed immediately. Presently, what we are doing differently is we are being intentional about centering community voice through community-driven solutions initiatives that move us beyond racial equity and into shared decision-making in areas like TST and with the Equity Action Circle. We are contracting with more culturally specific agencies that work with communities that have been directly impacted and harmed by government and institutions. And we are being intentional about building formal relationships with trusted messengers that have never worked with Ramsey County before. Most importantly today, as an organization, we are acknowledging that the legacy and ongoing issues caused by racism requires recognition, reconciliation, repair, and accountability. Chair and commissioners, this will require dismantling systems of racial inequity and the policies that perpetuate them. It's more important today than ever, and I think you know that. In order to address the intergenerational harm caused by institutional and structural racism, we must hold ourselves accountable, as accountability is the keystone of our racial equity work. We need to create processes and systems that are designed to help individuals and systems to be held in check for their decisions and actions for whether the work being done reflects and embodies racial equity and social justice principles. To hold ourselves accountable, we must find ways to ensure the wisdom, input, and guidance, recommendations, and demands of historically marginalized communities. It is no longer enough to simply listen to community voice without implementing community voice. Some recommendations and actions that can be taken to ensure we are serious about the proclamation are: diversify and enhance citizen advisory committees, boards, and commissions; increase contracting opportunities with community-based organizations and vendors who reflect the communities we serve; support the Diversity, Inclusion, and Organizational Development Unit of HR to provide ongoing and regular racial equity trainings to increase awareness across our organization; value and commit to diversify workforce, modernize job classifications, career pathways, and enhance the hiring processes; and ensure all employees and leadership are aware of the process to address reports of racist behavior and practices when they are made internally and with the public. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I will close this portion of our initial presentation. We would stand for questions and discussion. I want to thank Maria, Elizabeth, Sarah, Prince, and Kathy for being here today. I want to thank many, many other staff who are not here today but are in support of the individuals who presented or came up to be a part of this dialogue. The board has challenged this organization to move beyond words on conversations about building a community in which all are valued and thrive. The board has challenged us to continue to find ways to recognize that race and racism and racial equity need to be at the center of that process, and that we cannot achieve one without dismantling the other. We do believe there are concrete steps to be taken, and that this is more than an acknowledgement alone and sitting back and then wondering what we can do about it. There are many tangible steps as an organization that we have begun to take and we can continue to take, and our leaders laid many of those out today. We would stand for any additional comments, suggestions, or thoughts you may all have, and I want to thank the board for their leadership in this space and the desire to continue to drive harder, not be comfortable with where we're at, be authentic and transparent in the work that we do, and recognize that until we reach a state in which the color of one's skin is not predictive of outcomes, we have not achieved racial equity in alignment with the policy as outlined in the policy before you today. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all who've shared with us this morning and to all who are unpacking this work day to day throughout our county. Your words, as I said in response to Kathy's in the beginning, have all been poignant and certainly speak to an ongoing and enduring crisis of racial injustices that continue to impact all of us. We appreciate the work that you have put forward with us in designing this particular resolution that is before us. And we'll have now a conversation with board members regarding this resolution and advancing all of the work to which you spoke in Ramsey County. We do know that we are not where we want to be, that there is work that has been prepared and that is dedicatedly being pursued in order to achieve racial equity in Ramsey County. That it is not light work, and it certainly is not business as usual. I am going to ask commissioners who would like to speak, because I am not seeing the participant list that's making any sense to me, to please raise your hands. The participant list is not functioning well for me. And I believe that I see almost every hand. I'm just going to start with the screen and go across as I am seeing it, beginning with Commissioner Fretham.
Thank you, Chair Carter. I'd like to echo the thanks for all the staff that spoke today and who have been working with myself and Commissioner Manis-Castillo on these efforts for several weeks now. We lifted this up as an idea when it was raised by Representative Ruth Richardson, who just got this resolution passed in the House over the weekend, and our colleagues over in Hennepin County. And I really want to thank our staff who have done an amazing job pushing back on us and really forcing us to think about what we wanted to do with this. And our board action today in applying this policy to us makes it an opportunity for us as leaders to take ownership of what our institution has done and our responsibility to be the embodiment of pushing forward these changes and to take ownership of ourselves in leading racial equity and change. Racism is a public health crisis like COVID. And I think like COVID, we should have a data dashboard that shows the impact. You know, week after week, we have RBAs before us that talk about the disproportionate impacts on our community in every single topic imaginable that we cover as a county. We should have weekly updates about what we're doing and how it is impacting racial disproportionality and disproportionate impacts at board meetings. Our newspaper should be covering these daily death counts that are attributable to racism. We should have newspaper articles of people who are suffering because of racism. We should have a coordinated federal response like we need for COVID. We should have significant financial investments to address racism like we should have for COVID. These are one and the same, and not only are we dealing with the public health crisis in COVID and in racism, but we're dealing with it in climate change, we're dealing with it in our economic collapse. But unlike COVID and climate change and economic collapse, racism overlaps all of these, because in those three areas, we see the disproportionate impact of those health crises in the BIPOC communities. So lifting up racism and making that our central goal and mission and fight, like we've done in our vision and priorities, is so critical and important. And I'm glad that we're talking about this today, and we are talking about it every week. And it is really time for some actionable action. So thank you for bringing this to us today. Thank you for continuing to hold us accountable. I'm really glad that we have created an organization where we have empowered our staff to push back on us when we bring forward something that's not ready, and empowered you to say, hey, this should apply to you too, and to bring that forward for us to vote on. So I'm really excited to support this today, and thank you for continuing these efforts. And then I just want to add that I had the opportunity last night to talk to some of my constituents and community members, some close neighbors who are BIPOC community members, and hearing about how, you know, the history that Kathy went through today, and that is not just history, that is today. That is my community here in Shoreview saying, we don't feel safe going to our park anymore because there are too many posts on social media of people saying there are people at the park and we don't think they belong here. They don't look like they belong here, when they are longtime residents who have been using that park. And they just don't look like they belong here because they don't look like me. I have a dear friend who again lives in Shoreview who says they're considering after their kids graduate, maybe moving back to St. Paul because it's just too hard to know if they are going to go out and face a question that they're just not mentally prepared for, or an incident of racism that they just hadn't prepared for that day. And that hurts them more than it hurts me, but it's not what we want to hear in our community. And that, you know, hearing from the youth in my community who have organized an amazing coalition to ensure that the other Black, Indigenous, and students of color in our schools don't face the erasure that they face, that they don't have the traumatizing experience that they had in one of the best school districts, you know, in the state, one of the best school districts in the state, because they felt like they weren't seen or heard for when they couldn't be their full self in their schools. So this is not just a past issue, this is a today issue, and this is something that we can't stand for anymore, and our communities are standing up. So thank you for helping be our partners in this work as our staff. Thank you for holding us accountable, and looking forward to voting for this resolution today and to our future work.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Fretham, and for your work in representing all of us in designing together with staff the resolution that is moving before us. I'm going to also call on Commissioner Mattis Castillo, given her work in that regard, and then continue around on the screen to call on each member of the board. Commissioner Mattis Castillo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to echo my gratitude to the incredible staff who have worked really hard to not only put this resolution together, but all the work leading up to it. As Maria said, this has been a very long journey, and we have made incredible strides as a county in a relatively short amount of time, based largely on the staff that has moved this work, but also all of our fellow commissioners on this board and on this call today that have really worked for a long time to address the areas of systematic racism that lead to the health inequities and inequities in our communities. And so I want to thank all of you as our fellow board members as well for your work, because this is certainly not an individual effort, but truly a team effort. So thank you for that. I just want to share some other thoughts. I was listening to National Public Radio a couple days ago to a scholar talking about how we can be allies in the Black Lives Matter movement, how we can move things forward. And so I agreed with most of the things that she said. She said something that has had me kind of left unsettled. And she said that the reason she's able to engage in the work of dismantling white supremacy and systematic racism as a white woman is because it wasn't about her. She said it wasn't personal, that she could engage, and that as white people, we should know it isn't about us, but it's about a system. And that has left me unsettled, because I actually think that that's false. I think as white people, as white allies, we actually need to address the parts that we are personally responsible, whether knowingly or unknowingly. And so as a white woman, I will say that I have participated, whether knowingly or unknowingly, willfully or unwillfully, in the system that has led to racial inequities in our community. So I personally want to apologize to all of our communities of color for my participation in anything that has led to systematic racism and the inequalities that have led into all of the data that we know today. And so I just want to take a moment to personally say that I apologize and take responsibility, and that I will continue to be both internally reflective, self-reflective, but also to scrutinize every decision and action that I take moving forward, and continue to do and take responsibility for those actions. Many of you know I come from a multiracial family. And I can tell you this, This is an issue that we talk about every day. And it isn't an issue that's just enough for me to be a mom with biracial children or be married to a Latino immigrant. This is an issue that comes up in our own household every day. And it takes real thought and reflection and conversation to say, how do my actions impact my family? How do my actions impact the community? And it's really important that we continue to have these hard conversations and to continue to do this work. It can be tireless and exhausting. And every time I feel that way, I think, well, how much more exhausting is it for our communities of color? And that's my own privilege speaking. And so to be able to call that out and own it is incredibly important. And I know that many of you are in the same place and as we've done this work moving forward. I also think that we need to, as Kathy Hadeen said earlier, is that we need to call it out and name it. We need to name the actions that have taken place that have caused harm. And so as I've been thinking about this over the last several weeks about what actions have those been, there's a few that come to mind that I feel like we just need to say it out loud. And so I'm going to share those. When I first came on the board, one of the first things I did is went out to Boys Totem Town and toured that site. And I could not believe what I saw there, and that all of the boys that were incarcerated at that time were young Black and brown boys. And that has stayed with me. Now, we have done tremendous work to move away from that model. We have closed Boys Totem Town. And I also don't want to dismiss the hard work of our staff that tried their best to make it a better place for the children who are incarcerated there. But individual intentions, and no matter how hard we work, aren't enough when the system itself is inequitable. And so as we think about those things and how things have come from the past and move forward, I want us to remember those. I also want to consider the case of Dale Street in Frogtown. We've been doing really great work in the last few years on replacing the bridge and working with community to reconnect Rondo. But that's only part of it. That bridge feeds into a section of Dale north of University in my district, which is high speed, indifferentially maintained barrier in the heart of a neighborhood of color. That's because one half of Dale Street, one half of the cultural and business heart of that neighborhood was torn down to make it wider and faster. And though that decision didn't happen in the 50s or 60s, but it was a racist decision making it explicit. It happened in the 90s by my own predecessor in this role that helped make it happen. I get requests all the time from the people in Frogtown asking how we can fix Dale. It'll be a problem in the decades to come, but one that is on the front of my list of things to do. The racist decisions making never fully disappeared. We've continually widened roads through poor neighborhoods full of predominantly people of color for years, even as we've added trees and bump outs and whatever else to streets like Randolph and the wealthier, whiter areas of our communities. We've treated those white neighborhoods as places to be and our BIPOC neighborhoods as places to get through. This has to change. We're doing this work. We're moving forward with a new visioning plan on Rice Street, which we have made a super highway for people to get through quickly through the north end. And now we need to take a look and really vision a plan that it's a place to be and not a place to get through. There's a column on Cathedral Hill that's been there since 1903, a monument to soldiers of the Civil War. I'm a veteran myself, as you all know. I helped design curriculum around the monuments on the Capitol grounds, many of which memorialize veterans like myself. But on the top of the particular column is a statue of Josiah King. He's on the column because he was the first Minnesotan to enlist on the side of the Union in 1861. But before he got to fight the Confederacy, King's unit was sent to fight Native people in the Dakota War. They ended up at a place in North Dakota named Whitestone Hill, where they massacred hundreds of Native people, including women and children. I don't know what Josiah King was thinking on that day, and I don't know what the people were thinking in 1903 when they put a statue up for him. But I know that in 2020, we have choices about who we continue to honor, just as we have choices about the policies we enact and the injustices we permit. I think King's statue should come down, and there are plenty of other monuments to men of this era that should seriously reconsider throughout Minnesota, from the names of the streets and towns to Ramsey County itself. Dismantling the legacy of racism in our communities is going to take work at every level. It will be in the policies we enact to reduce disparities. It will be in the capital projects we pursue, and in the built environment we perpetuate. It will be hard. It'll make all of us uncomfortable, but it has to. If we aren't uncomfortable with the changes we make, we're not going far enough. This is a crisis, and we need to treat it like one. I so appreciate the leadership of the staff and our community that help us to grow and guide so that we truly can have meaningful action in the months and years to come and make Ramsey County a place that all are valued and thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Mavis-Castillo. Well said. I am going to continue around the screen then as I see it. Beneath Commissioner Nicole Fretham, I have Commissioner Mary Jo McGuire. Commissioner McGuire. Commissioner McGuire, we cannot hear you. I will continue, Commissioner McGuire, while you repair. I'm going to move on to Commissioner McDonough, and we will come back. Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kathy, Maria, Sarah, your presentation, your words were extremely powerful, and I think every employee in our county needs to hear those. It really demonstrates the importance of us to be able to have people do this work, such as you. And I know Elizabeth was there, and many people were standing with you in your presentation. But the importance of heart and mind in our work, the importance of mind, the professionalism, the understanding, but then also the heart of lived experiences and bringing that to the work that we do. And that just came out so much in each and every one of your presentations. I was looking at, you gotta bear with me one second. Looking at our RBAs and under community participation, level of community participation, inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and empower. I know I don't have to repeat them for you guys, because you guys are the ones that built that. But it's just as important for us as a board to engage with our staff and our leadership and our employees in the same way. And there are times when each one of those is the way we do it. And on this work, this needs to be empowered. Empowerment to you, to the folks in Ramsey County, and that was demonstrated today. The way I see this work moving forward is the conversations that the board has had, and it was recognized we started last year, and what is our role? Why are we as electeds leaving ourselves out of this? And I'm so pleased that today we no longer are, and we are being held accountable, just like everybody else in this organization. But to really see how we put this back to you. For you to own what this needs to look like for us. And that's the strength, I think, of where we're at in this county, in the relationship between a governing board, between a county manager and leadership and administration, and between frontline employees. And then it's just came out so clearly today in the presentation from all three of you. And again, you three were there, but I know there was so many more people working with you, and please share that. My thanks, my respect, my commitment to honor the work that you have done here. I will never change anything that you bring to us. This is not the last time we are going to have to take action on this. We are not going to solve the problem with one action today. This is the foundation of us moving forward. It's built on the foundation that we've been working on for a number of years, actually, and we continue to build on that foundation. But when it comes to this, I have the confidence that we have the right people in place to continue to drive us to do better, to strengthen our approaches, whether it's through board actions and direct policy, whether it's through administrative work, to actually make change and be held accountable to make that change in this community. So again, thank you so much from my heart to each and every one of you who worked on this and brought this back to us today. And we're a part of continuing to challenge me as a 65-year-old white man to do better each and every single day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McDonough. Commissioner Ortega?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to echo what my colleagues have stated, and very eloquently, by the way. But I do want to take this opportunity to sort of also thank all the folks that came before us. You know, we started on this journey intentionally about over a decade ago, and I can think of many individuals, many department heads that sort of on their own started taking what I call the baby steps to bring us to this point. Now we are galloping forward, and I'm very proud of that. And I just want to say, you know, we got a great board now that's going to take this to move forward at a much faster pace. And that's all good. It's all good, but I want to sort of bring back the fact that I could think of quite a few people who took on this challenge when there was not a consensus among us or even in the community. So we sort of stand on their shoulders also as we today we make these great strides forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Ortega. I'm going to call on Commissioner McGuire. We need to do a device check.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Give you an opportunity.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
We're going to have to keep working on this. I don't know what the issue is, but thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm glad you can all hear me now. And I just want to echo my amazing colleagues' comments and sentiments, how grateful we are to you, Director Hadeen, and to Elizabeth and Maria and Sarah and Prince and all of your amazing work and your words and your ability to keep pushing us and the desire that I have that you do keep pushing us to do the work that needs to be done here. We are very committed to this work, and we really rely on you to help us know how to do that. So thank you so much for all of that. There are, as Commissioner Fretham says, and we've all acknowledged there's racial incidents going on throughout our county. In Roseville, there's horrendous, horrific things happening to Black Lives Matter signs, with raccoons being nailed to signs, and it's horrible to have instances like that happening, and we need to do everything we can in all of our communities so that these instances do not happen and that we have a committed community response to them. This is ongoing work. This is a journey we're on, but it's a long time journey. It's not a journey that I see having an end. This is just work that will need to be continued We need to continue to make it front and center, which is why I'm grateful for this board resolution. We've been doing this work these last, in past years, but to keep it front and center and to have board resolutions like this that keep reminding us of all the work that we need to do. This is systemic change. It's difficult, and we need to keep asking questions and finding ways that we can do it better. So thanks to everyone who has a part in this, and I'm, along with my colleagues, are committed to doing whatever we can as a board and as a county to really keep this work going. So thank you all so much for your work.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And I'll turn to Commissioner Reinhardt.
Wow. This has been the most powerful conversation we have had as a board, in my opinion. From the history to today and going forward, there's been a lot of work. There's absolutely a lot of work, and we need to recognize that. But we have such a long ways to go. And one of the things that this board has always done is to say we'll take on the tough issues, but in order to do that, the best thing you can do is to shine a light on it. And in this case, a really bright light. Because these are the facts. People can say whatever they want, just like people are saying different things about the coronavirus. Just look at the facts, and you will see that what is being said is accurate. Some of the things that are happening in our community are truly difficult to understand how hate can potentially win over love. I know it doesn't in the end, but when we look at some of the things, the individual things that have happened to people, it's gotten worse. Going into a grocery store, walking down the street and being harassed. That's not something that I have to experience. Although we experience it a little bit in emails. So, because people aren't comfortable, as I think Commissioner Matas Castillo said, aren't comfortable with the fact that we're calling it out. And we need to continue to do that. And I know we will. I mean, that's what this board has been dedicated to. This didn't just start with us. We've been working on this. But it has come more to the forefront, thank goodness, because that means that we have more partners that can help us with this. I do think, again, I mean, the powerful message, the information that's been provided to us and that will continue to be provided to us is so incredibly important as we're out in the community talking about what we can do. It's not even as much about looking back, and you have to look back in order to make better decisions going forward into the future. But everybody, no matter where they come from, can be a part of this because it's the right thing to do. We're all humans. And we all have to recognize how important it is. We are all loved. We are all part of the fabric of our community and how that plays out. I think also not only have we been working on this, but I think that we need to take this message beyond, and we have to a certain extent, but I think we need to do more with the Association of Minnesota Counties, and specifically having just come out of the National Association of Counties annual business meeting yesterday, where there was very little, if any, discussion about racism. We need to take this to the federal level. We need to take it to the National Association of Counties. And I know that a number of us have leadership positions there. And it doesn't matter if you're in the Environment Committee, as I am, or in economic justice. I mean, there are so many different ways that we can have input there. And I know that we will, because that's who we are as individuals and as a board. But we need to, move forward in a very intentional way. I will just say one other thing, and that is that when I have been participating in the virtual town halls and meetings that we have had that have been specifically or part of, actually everything that we've done has been related to, as Commissioner Fretham said, to what we do in every aspect of what we do, from public works to parks to libraries to everything in between. To hear the really straightforward discussions that take place, and for the most part, the respect that is shown for people within that discussion. It's a safe place to have those discussions. Our community engagement on this issue, I believe, is great. We can always do more. I mean, there's always more that we can do and take actions on. But that's one of the things, honestly, that I think, you have to look for the positives and the things that are difficult, I think. And the fact that we have been doing a lot of things virtually, I think, has really opened up to more people the opportunity to speak up and speak out and to talk about what they need and what we can do and how we can move forward in a really positive way. And I think that's, to me, one of the positives that have come out of this is listening to people and hearing where everyone's coming from. Not everyone, but we're going to try to get more and more people involved. But much more diversity than we've ever had in the public meetings that we've gone to, at least that I've gone to. So I think that I am also very proud of the work specifically of Commissioner Fretham and Commissioner Matas-Castillo in making sure that we brought this forward. But I know this board is incredibly supportive and has really pushed to make a lot of things happen. And as Commissioner McDonough, you said, the staff just needs to know how grateful we are and the hard work and knowing that we're going to be there right beside them and making sure that we get this done. Thank you to all of my colleagues, to our staff for the incredible work. This is just a momentous point in time, and we can be uncomfortable and move forward and do everything that we need to do and ride the emotions as they go, because we've got to get it done. We just got to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt. I want to say thank you to all of our board members for your comments and reflections. Speaking to those who are at the front in the courtroom, Maria, Elizabeth, Sarah, Prince. I know that Kathy is there, and also to our county manager. Thank you so very, very much. We are in a point in time right now during COVID-19, following George Floyd's murder and the recognition of racial injustices that have existed, perpetuated throughout our country, our state, our county, throughout the world for that matter, that have historically and that continue to impact us in our communities. We are at an inflection point. And it's not just because of what we've seen recently in the COVID-19 and in George Floyd. I think it is primarily because of the work that you have prepared for us and that you've placed before us, the positioning that you've provided, given the direction this board has set for us to be able to launch even greater work, to rid ourselves of the injustices, of the disparities, and of the impacts on all our lives, because this is not just about what happens to people of color. This is about what happens to all of us as we exist in an ecosystem together, and what happens to one absolutely affects the other. I believe this to be an inflection point for us. Yes, so much work has been going on, and all of us have participated in that work here at Ramsey County, coming here at different points of time, having different experiences, but all building on one another. And having staff members who, from the experiences of their lives, have brought this forward to us in this way, as Commissioner McDonough has reflected, is a great opportunity for us. Blending your life experiences and your talents and your skills with those already here at Ramsey County is a great opportunity, say, as far less important than what we do. These words on paper today build upon many words that have been shared verbally and that have been shared in writing in the past. A collection of work, from everything that we've done in justice system reform and are continuing to do, and across the platform of offerings in health and human services and in economic development, across the manner in which we have executed the use of our COVID response CARES dollars, across the equity organizations that we have put in place to impact all of our work, to embed in all of the decisions that we make. We have a package of work that you have largely prepared for us that enables us to take advantage of this inflection point. Yes, so many who witnessed the death of George Floyd juxtaposed against the devastation of COVID-19 have had their eyes opened, and all of us have opportunity to be far more dedicated and far more committed to the cause of eliminating racial injustices as we see the impacts across all areas of life. And I am thankful that we have a platform set so that we can do this work. So as we entertain this resolution again, it is words on paper. It chronicles where we are today, and it helps us to understand that this is not us declaring an emergency today that just happened. This is about acknowledging what has been going on as a crisis among us for centuries, but also about acknowledging our role and responsibility for addressing it today, and for doing so ever more fervently, ever more aggressively, for connecting to what our vision is in Ramsey County of a vibrant community where all are valued and thrive, of ensuring that we accelerate all of the work that we have been doing, that we can more aggressively pursue it and hold ourselves accountable together with our partners and community for driving the change that we all need to see. So once again, just as this has happened intentionally, that there have been causes for these disparities, we will move forward intentionally and be accountable for the changes that we want to see together with you and together with our entire community. I want to say thank you and acknowledge that we've had great discussion, and I really appreciate where we are today and our ability to move forward in a manner that accelerates the work that we have been doing, takes advantage of this inflection point, and moves us forward. I want to ask if there's additional discussion or questions on the motion that is before us as we address the resolution. And thank you. If not, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Fretham,
Aye.
Mattis Castillo,
Aye.
McDonough,
Aye.
McGuire,
Aye.
Ortega,
Aye.
Reinhardt,
Aye.
Carter.
Aye. And thank you. The motion then has passed. Next, we'll turn to our county-wide policy requiring face coverings in county facilities, and I'll ask for a motion.
So moved.
So, second.
All right, I believe that was Commissioner Mattis Castillo and Commissioner McGuire. Thank you for your motion and second. Is there any discussion prior to, oh, yeah. Is there any discussion? I'm going to turn to the county manager for the beginning of this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The policy in front of us today would expand the mask wearing provision policy that has already been enacted for Ramsey County employees, contractors, volunteers in our facilities to expand now to anyone on the premises of a Ramsey County facility. This language attempts to remain consistent with the approach we've used to date. It is in alignment with a recognition from public health that we believe we now have enough available cloth face coverings or disposable masks, and in the instances in which we need face shields to provide adequate protection while also ensuring that those with hearing impairments have the ability to visually see mouths and movement. We believe we are set up to now be able to implement this policy in a way where we will not have to turn anyone away at our door. And I thank the staff in public health, in the chief clerk's office, the county attorney's office, property management, and everybody else I just forgot to thank for their important work on moving this forward in alignment with the conversation the board had last week. And final thing I will just acknowledge from the earlier conversation, I pledge to the board that I will follow up with the city administrators and send out an update to Ramsey County's policy wherever we stand at the end of today, while also asking for specific updates from our city partners so that we can provide that information to all of you as a follow-up. We're already doing that CARES Act follow-up information, so the timing is good for us to do that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We've already spoken to this quite a bit at the start, and we have resolved that in this discussion, we will be providing direction, not only to accept this RDA as we will be voting on it, but also to guide and direct any broader work that should be done. So I wanted to just simply remind commissioners of that. I'm looking to a participant screen again that is blank. And so I need your help. Would you please raise your hand if you'd like to comment in this regard? Commissioner Fretham, and then Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Chair Carter. Just following up on some of my earlier comments, one request I'm wondering if we could do. I know following the murder of George Floyd, our communications team very rapidly responded to a request for a curfew page to help mitigate the impact of a patchwork of curfews. Could we also similarly have a mask requirement page in the interim as we explore potential expansions of mask requirements to indicate which cities in Ramsey County have implemented mask requirements? That might be helpful and would be a handy link on our COVID page. And then just in regards to I support this mask provision, and I support further mask provisions. And I appreciate Commissioner McDonough's comment earlier about, local jurisdictions. And I just want to add, as the person here who represents the most different jurisdictions, representing all or part of 9 different cities, that, unlike them, we have public health experts literally sitting at our table at our weekly meetings. We are full-time in these positions, whereas our city council members and mayors, many of them in my cities at least, are not full-time. They're working other jobs in the midst of this pandemic. So our cities don't have those resources at their table, and it's really our public experts who should be guiding this, and not, it shouldn't be politicized, and yet it has been. So right now, we're asking businesses to make these choices, and businesses shouldn't be making public health decisions, especially in a pandemic. And on top of that, in my area, city lines aren't clear. It's very confusing to determine what city you are in. In fact, in some of our businesses don't necessarily help. They're, White Bear Meadery, which is a great local business, is actually in Gem Lake, not in White Bear or White Bear Township, which is confusing enough as it is. So having this patchwork of ordinances in these areas, it's not clear to citizens. And understanding that, some folks might get mad if we overstep that local boundaries. The person they're most likely to get mad at about that is me. And I'm willing to take the blame for that, because I think if public health guidance says that masks are really going to be what curbs this upcoming spike in transmission, if that's what's going to keep our residents safe and get us back on the path to lower transmission and get us closer to things being able to be open, then I'll take the hit for that. I am willing to do that. And I understand the complexity of enforcement. I really hope that our first step in any sort of enforcement measure would be handing someone who doesn't have a mask. If we can do that at a beach, we can do that at Target. And I really hope it wouldn't go to jail. I think we could come up with a compassionate plan for enforcement, and I hope we can have some further discussion on that. So, thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Fretham, 2 comments on the masks and communications update that would feel consistent with the way we've approached other topics. We'll explore how we communicate the information specifically back around citywide ordinances. Thank you for that suggestion. More to come as soon as next week. And then finally, just one point on a particular comment you made towards the end as you were commenting on enforcement. I agree with you. I don't think we would be asking for a jail provision related to mask enforcement by any means. But unlike we are doing with this policy, where we are able to ensure that we have availability of personal protective equipment for any individual coming in our doors, we do not feel as though the supply of available PPE within our organization, through that public health and our incident management logistics lens, we do not feel that we could do a broad-based applicability to ensure everyone everywhere always has access to that if they don't have a facial covering. And so we would run into a different set of dynamics on a countywide level that extends beyond county buildings. And I just want to highlight that as something as we go forward and explore further.
Thank you very much. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I really appreciate my colleagues, Commissioner Fretham's comments, because I share many of them as our communities connect borders. And Roseville did just pass last night their own mask ordinance, as I know I'm sure you did. And we were asked, I was asked last week if we were going to do it more countywide so they wouldn't have to. So I appreciate the discussion we've been having around that. And when I asked last week about that, the sense was that we weren't able to, and you said, County Manager O'Connor, that new information has come from the County Attorney's Office that we could go further, and I just wondered if you wanted to clarify that, or if that's not. I know we're doing this now for what we are able to do, but maybe at a later time, I would like that clarification of how much we are able to do, and I don't know if you're able to share any of that now. And then I have another question as well.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, and I'm looking at County Attorney John Kelly in case there's anything he wants to add. Sorry, Chief Deputy County Attorney John Kelly. Apologies to County Attorney Choi if he's watching. I don't know that I can add anything beyond earlier, which is from a policy perspective, what the board can do is in front of you today, and there are limits on the policy end of applying countywide. The ordinance would be another step that would allow you to go further. And in my response last week, what I meant to say was this relates to the policy piece. Under normal means, there are ways to enact ordinances, and now under an emergency scenario, the county attorney talks about there are more expedited ways to enact ordinances. And so the county board can always explore the ordinance option if it wants to go beyond what's here in the policy. And I'm looking at John, who's nodding. John, do you want to add anything?
No.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that clarification. That helps. I'm curious. Just I have a question about the parks issue, and are we, as we've indicated, people are going to be asked to wear masks outdoor in parks if they're in gatherings. I'm reading. I read through the policy that we're considering passing. And do we make it? I hope we make exceptions for family units, because we've always been making exceptions for family units. I guess if they don't get too big. So I'm just wondering if you could clarify on that. I absolutely support a mask policy, and outdoors when there's people gathered too close together, they should be wearing masks. I agree with all of that. I'm just wondering if we could have a little more clarification about outdoors in parks where families are gathered, if we're adhering to the state rules on that, if we could just refresh our minds on that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, I will ensure that we add additional clarity to make sure it's clear about families and family units. And I'm going to turn to Director Kathy Hadeen, who wants to add a comment.
Madam Chair and Commissioner McGuire, the RBA is for mostly staff and visitors into our space. It does talk about being outdoors. That is specifically for our staff, in that they still need to have a mask on or a face covering on, and they need to maintain 6 feet of distance around others. If they are outside of that space, they're in a park working and no one is around them, it is similar to other spaces in our office where they can remove the face covering in those spaces. But this RBA is specific to, and around outdoors, is specific to our staff usage.
And so I appreciate that. And so when we're saying county properties, we do mean our parks for visitors to our parks, or do we not? Are they? I mean, I think people should wear masks generally. So I don't know. I just didn't know if we were being specific about that in this ordinance. And I think when you're outdoors, obviously that you have more discretion if you're not by people, for sure. So what is the rule about visitors to our parks?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, the piece about visitors to the parks, Director Hadeen just mentioned, which is that is more applicable. That's applicable to county employees. It is not specific in the employees. However, in the definition section, we will add a definition around outdoor setting below indoor setting that clarifies this. And I appreciate the input, because we were developing this on obviously a tight timeline since last Tuesday as we expand the definition here. And so there are spots where we want to continue to become more specific and clear in what we are laying out. We will clarify that an outdoor setting would involve places like Ramsey County properties that involve places such as parks. And we will make sure we are clear on encouraged but not required in outdoor settings related to individuals. And we'll reference family units as well.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And, as I look through it, I do see a section on where to wear a face covering, and it does specifically apply to county employees, others, contractors, volunteers, students, interns, and visitors in buildings. So, there is some weaving together here that will be helpful as you also look back. County managers you've volunteered to do to ensure that it is clear about families as well who are visiting us.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I need to remind you that I do not see a participant list. And so, Commissioner Montes-Castillo, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just am going to say that I am fully in support of a more broad ordinance that requires masks. I think it will help in clarity. And, as we're working to tweak this policy version, I would like us to consider moving toward an ordinance. I have heard from many constituents and folks, even after our discussion last week, I received emails from residents, even outside of my district, saying, thank you, please make a mask mandate. We're really concerned. And I think that, given, I understand that we can't supply masks for every single resident in Ramsey County. there are lots of opportunities that people can use bandanas and, such to make their own. But I think that we need to move both the as we've talked about racism as a public health issue, we've raised all the issues of COVID. We need to protect our communities, especially in Ramsey County being the most racially diverse county, is really thinking about as visitors are coming into our county and going out, and what does that look like and how do we spread? And so to protect our residents, I would like to move to a county-wide ordinance. And so I just want to put that on the record, is that it's important for us to make these bold decisions to protect our residents. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm looking to others who may have comments to make. And if not, I know that all of us have expressed support already for the mandate that we'll be voting on now that applies to county buildings and facilities. And we will be, as has been indicated and requested as well, expanding information on our website about the policy that we will be voting on should this pass. I anticipate that it will. We will also be sharing this information in administrative meetings with other cities as we work together with them in COVID response so that they are able to align their policies with this one as they are able to do in the short term. And it makes good sense, although we're not acting on this today, but that we continue to explore what a mask ordinance might look like and how it could apply to other communities as we talk with those communities and as they consider how they might accommodate such a mandate with COVID resources that they have at hand as well. I don't know if there are other things that should be said as we finish up this discussion. I will check in with the county manager to determine if you feel you have the direction and guidance that you need as we move toward the vote on this particular policy item. But if you have what you need also to explore additional work with our cities. And if others have comments, please do raise your hand because I can't see the participant list. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair,
Manager.
for the summary. I'll add one piece to earlier. When we reach out to cities, we will inquire with them about if they have any thoughts regarding a countywide mask ordinance. I believe that was something you just mentioned, to hear back. That's one avenue that we can hear from through this process. I'll bring any information that I can get back next week to the board, along with we will work to delineate the ordinance process that can be followed under the emergency declaration currently in effect for the COVID-19 emergency. We'll work with the county attorney's office and bring back that information for you next week so that we can present that during the COVID-19 update.
Thank you very much. We owe it to our communities to do as much as we possibly can to ensure that we can all live. Are there other comments in this regard prior to our vote? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Fretham,
Aye.
Mattis Castillo,
Aye.
McDonough,
Aye.
McGuire,
Aye.
Ortega,
Aye.
Reinhardt,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye. And thank you very much. That motion passes. Appreciate your participation, comments, and direction provided during these last two policy items. And we are at a point in our agenda then. We're recognizing that we have active work going on in the legislature. We'd appreciate a legislative update. I will call on Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I thank Jenna Rourke and Melissa Finnegan and our intern too, who are all working hard. They adjourned at 2 o'clock a.m. this morning, the House and Senate. So they were up very early this morning. People were following the session. So that ended the second special session. They were able to pass a negotiated version of police reform. Some of the provisions in that include a ban on chokeholds and warrior-style training, police residency incentives, use of force reforms, mental health and crisis intervention training, adding 2 public members to the Minnesota Board of Peace Officer Standards and Training, the Post Board, and arbitration changes. So those are some of the things that we're able to pass. Just a side note that there were some no votes from some of our county delegation members because they did not think it went far enough. So I know some people voted no on that for that reason. They took up the bonding bill in the House, and it failed as it did not have enough Republican votes to get the necessary supermajority. Because it failed in the House, the Senate did not take it up because it wouldn't have mattered. So the House voted 82-40 to pass a resolution yesterday to declare racism a statewide public health crisis. The Senate passed a resolution 37-30 urging Governor Walz to exclude public schools from future executive orders. And the House and Senate also passed legislation aimed at addressing the backlog of driver's license examinations and road testing backlogs. And this will head to the governor for signature. So there'll be likely another special session in mid-August. So thanks to Jenna Rourke and Melissa Finnegan for helping prepare that report on a quick turnaround from this morning at 2 a.m. adjournment. So thank you for that. As we've been saying, if you need any details, we can contact me or them. And just thanks everyone for all of your work as we've been continuing to contact legislators on the issues that we think are most important. I know I was in contact with Carlos Mariani on our Community Corrections Act funding because it got eliminated in the Ways and Means bill, and so we're working on that. So there's just always a constant ebb and flow of these issues. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the report, Commissioner McGuire. I'm going to hold to see if there are any questions of Commissioner McGuire or additional comments from Commissioner Castillo. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, I just want to add to our legislative report, we have a new member of the legislative team. Cassie Fitzgerald is stepping in because Melissa Finnegan in the very soon coming days is going to be the new mother of twins. And so we welcome Cassie Fitzgerald to the team who has been already stepped in and is helping in this effort. And as we move forward, as Melissa takes her leave. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Commissioner Manis-Castillo. Sorry, I forgot. I didn't mention that. Thank you. I was sort of thinking we did it last week, but good job on doing that. And Madam Chair, I just want to say another thing that we are talking about having another legislative meeting or call because we like to give them updates on what we're working on and what we're thinking about things, and we're going to probably have one in the next few weeks. So we'll keep you posted on that. But we want to keep the legislators up to speed on what we're working on. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And of course, to prepare for the next special session.
And for the next. And I do want to clarify that Carlos Mariani absolutely supports our Community Corrections Act funding. It was a part of an amendment that, a delete everything amendment that happened in Ways and Means that caused some of those for me, unintended consequences.
Right.
So, or for us, I should say. Thank you.
And I've got Commissioner McDonough and then Commissioner Reinhardt.
Yep, thanks, Madam Chair. And then I just wanted to report out real quickly on one thing that didn't pass in last special session. We had done a ton of work on waivers because we had gotten through the executive orders, and we wanted, if you recall, we were able to get, I believe, 12 or 13 that actually have a year extension, so we can continue to use them and help demonstrate and actually maybe make them permanent. And then all the other ones, we got a 60-day window when the executive order goes away, so there's not a hard stop and we can transition. There was one waiver that was really important to us and to MAXA and to AMC that did not get included in the last special session. We were really close to getting agreement by all 4 caucuses in the administration related to MPEP visits through video. It's been proven to be really, really productive. We did the work was done, and Melissa Finnegan just did an amazing job working with MAXA staff and AMC staff. We got the agreement between all the caucuses and the administration. And it was intended to pass this session, but with all the other things going on, it just got kind of put to the side. So for conversations about next special session, we have one waiver left that we really want to make sure we get here. That's good. We've already got the work done. Melissa and the team have really done that work, and Karen Zoltis and Tina Curry have really been able to provide why we need that 1-year extension on that, why that works. So I just wanted to report that out. I know the waivers issue has been really important. We've been doing some work through the PEG group on waivers, and we've had a lot of success, but we've got one waiver left to say before we say we have complete success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McDonough. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that we didn't get everything that we wanted in the policing legislation, but I am really pleased that we were able to make some steps, because some of the things that were listed as far as what was included, it wasn't that long ago that we didn't think we could even get that. So it's a first step. It's a first step. And I think that that is a recognition that this isn't the be all and end all, because there's a lot more to do there. So, but, you know, being grateful for what they were able to get done. I also think that it's just mind-boggling to me why the bonding bill is being held up based on political differences on something that's not even political, primarily face masks. I mean, seriously. We talk about economic recovery. We talk about resilience. We talk about all these things. How can that not be nonpartisan? It's just, as I said, kind of mind-boggling to me. But we will hopefully get it in the next special session, because we need it as a state. I mean, these are really important things, and I just hopefully, I believe that we will get it in the next session, because it's something that is so critical to the recovery in our state. So, but I just wanted to express my
Thank you.
displeasure with that.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments before we move forward? Well, once again, thank you so much, Commissioner McGuire and Commissioner Matas-Castillo, and all of you for the work that has been done during this legislative session, during this special session, and moving forward towards the next special session. Also, I have to say thank you to staff for attending to the various and long and late, or early for that matter, meetings. And to our legislators, particularly our delegation, for their ability to endure, to advocate, and to uplift the platforms that are important to us. Yes, it is very difficult to watch sometimes in the face of impediments that seem to be non-impediments that we should all agree upon. And to see something such as mask hold up agreement in other areas where face masks should be a non-issue and simply an assumed best practice to keep us all alive. But again, thank you to everyone who has done this work, and looking forward, of course, to the next special session and getting things done, such as the INFIT video visits. Thank you, Commissioner McDonough, for your focus in that area, and the bonding, of course, that we need. So
Madam Chair,
yes.
Madam Chair, if I could just echo those remarks. I mean, this entire board is and our staff is so active down at the legislature. Everybody's doing their part to really communicate things, and our legislators have been fierce advocates for our issues. And I know they're up against some numbers issues of not having the right numbers they need to get these things across the finish line, but they have been really strong in our advocacy. So just thanks to them for fighting for all of our issues. So thanks.
Thank you. There is so much going on, and we do appreciate all of the work that goes into this. So we finished the legislative update, and we have county connections next. I know that the county manager has had a lot of work to do in guiding toward our direction in the past weeks. And I will turn to County Manager O'Connor to share an update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, an update from elections, two important topics. Absentee ballot update. So the dates I have in front of me would be from July 13th, so it would be 8 days ago. As of July 13th of 2020, so this year, we had sent 55,291 absentee ballots out and received back just under 10,000. So 55,000 absentee ballots sent out by July 13th, and approximately 10,000, just a little less than that, have been returned. By comparison to 2 years ago, we had sent out on July 13th 3,103 absentee ballots and received back a little less than 1,000. So just to give you a sense in terms of the size of the absentee ballot numbers, the interest in it, clearly in a presidential election you're going to see larger numbers anyway, but we are seeing exponentially higher numbers in terms of absentee ballots requested, sent out, and returned. And this does tie a bit to the second comment about certification of election results and notification on statewide races as we head toward the primary. I just want to use this moment to share this information. I'm sure it'll be shared many times, but we are anticipating there will be delayed release of election results. So ballots, absentee ballots must be postmarked by August 11th, 8/11, the day of the primary election. They must be then received by the county by close of business on the 13th. That is the status here. Results statewide will therefore not be available until the night of the 13th. And there is local communication going on here in Ramsey County. There is communication through the Secretary of State's office going on a statewide basis. There is a coordinated effort around that information and how to share it out. But I wanted to make sure that we continue to talk about it here as at a moment when election integrity and the importance of every vote mattering to the broader discourse and conversations and our earlier conversations today about systemic disparities that we see. These are important pieces to be as transparent on as possible and accountable as we go forward. Turning to one of the actions you took today, I just wanted to highlight one piece to it. Action item 8, the request for board action today that related specifically to the CARES Act funding and homelessness. There were a couple of key actions there I just want to go back and touch upon because it does tie to some of the broader questions we get. Because of the CARES Act money coming after the county board initially declared its emergency period and began to allocate money in the space of homelessness and housing instability in new ways, today we are able to replenish the general contingent account for $1.8 million that we originally drew upon at the beginning of the year to address the emergency situation. And we were able to use CARES money in that place instead as an eligible CARES expense for the type of work that we are doing. This means the general contingent account for the county exists as we go forward through the second half of the year, which is an important part of ensuring that we have that financial flexibility that will be needed for unforeseen instances as they arise throughout the year. Additionally, going forward, we will list homelessness alongside financial assistance, small business support, and workforce supports as a fourth leg to that CARES Act funding based on your authorization today. Our total estimated budget right now, net of other grant funding received for homelessness, sits somewhere around $16.3 million. The action today was asking for slightly less than that, something around $12 million in terms of the movement of specific funds related to homelessness. But what you really see is a four-pronged approach to the CARES Act spending on a majority level. Approximately about $15 million in the areas of homelessness, economic development, small business supports, homelessness, small business supports, workforce development, and then $25 million for financial assistance. There are other key areas. $2.5 million has been budgeted for the conversation you heard earlier today about mobile testing, additional funding for community engagement and racial equity work that goes beyond the initial work. And I also want to point out that the community engagement and racial equity work is also a part of transforming that entire portfolio I just described. Money related to contracts for the disaster cost recovery and compliance to ensure that we spend this $96 million in accordance with the federal money. And then the question that a lot of people ask is how much money is Ramsey County keeping internal to itself? That number right now in this budget approximates up to $18.5 million. That includes personnel costs to respond to CARES Act or COVID-related needs within the county, as well as $10 million in non-personnel spending based on other pieces to date and projections going forward. I hope that's just a generally helpful outline to that work, and I wanted to go back and say thank you for the allocation today. We'll continue to come back because we did not ask for the full $40 million to be allocated today. Based on previous board conversations, we'll continue to bring back requests for board actions as we go so we can continue to talk about this work, but wanted to highlight that. I'm going to pause quickly, Madam Chair. If there are any questions on the CARES Act piece or on the elections, otherwise I have one final topic I will turn to next. Commissioner McGuire, I believe, has a question, Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner McGuire, thank you. Sorry for the mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, County Manager, for that report. I don't know when to ask this question, but I did get a question from one of our legislators about how are we coming on using Mary Hall and Boys Totem Town, and I don't know when to ask that update question. I just wondered, we are using both of those facilities, and are they at capacity? And I know that we might be getting it in a homelessness report from Commissioner Manis-Castillo, but I just don't know when to ask about that.
Madam Chair.
This is a great time, Commissioner, or County Manager, would you please address it?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, we'll continue to bring back updates on specific numbers. The short answer is yes, we are using both sites. We better hope we are not at capacity right now on our isolation and quarantine sites. We see numbers moving up, and I can assure you we are not. We're actually at one of the lowest censuses we've seen since the isolation, quarantine, or respite work began. So we're at a relatively low number, but the transitions have occurred to where Boys Totem Town is being used as a site right now. The transitions at Mary Hall continue. They began last week as we transition away from initial hotels to the next phase of our work.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to confirm that that was happening because I said it was happening, and I'm glad to see that.
Other questions? It appears not. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will turn now to respond specifically on some questions and actions the board asked to take approximately 3 or 4 weeks ago. I'm sorry I don't have the exact timeline in front of me as it relates to the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office and some information that came forward that you read about in the media and commented on at the board meeting. There were 3 specific actions related to trust, accountability, and transparency that came forward during that conversation and have been being followed up on since that time. One of those actions related to a question around engaging with the community and broader conversations around an appointed versus an elected office of the sheriff. What does that look like and what does that mean? I will come back to that topic and conclude on that particular piece. Second was an ask to move forward on the creation of a role, an accountability officer role that would report up to the Deputy County Manager of Safety and Justice to assure trust, transparency, and accountability into the operations of the Sheriff's Office. Those conversations are underway and have begun with the Human Resources Department about proper classification and structure. There is a part of that conversation around accountability, trust, transparency that will overlay with the community dialogue and input piece that I mentioned a second ago. And so we are concurrently moving these pieces, recognizing that one piece alone does not fully move the dialogue, nor address some of the systemic challenges that have been discussed through other means, even in today's board meeting. The third piece talked about engagement with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights to talk more broadly about looking at the law enforcement functions within Ramsey County, starting there with the freedom to go wherever it may go in terms of evaluating and exploring racial inequities, human rights, and areas in need of improvement within our organization. In other words, recognizing that in that approach to trust, accountability, and transparency, outside eyes need to be a part of the process for where we go moving forward. There have been conversations that initially involved the chair and have since involved the county manager and the commissioner of human rights, who provided me with a number of recommended entities who would be well suited to provide the type of evaluation from the outside that this board discussed a few weeks ago. We are in preliminary explorations with those entities now at this time, following our regular procurement practices to ensure that we conduct a fair and appropriate process. I cannot name the firms that were suggested to us today for that reason, but we'll continue to update you in subsequent weeks as that work moves forward. But rest assured, we are moving down the road of bringing in an outside entity to examine Ramsey County and continue down the road of this human rights and broader systemic nature of racial equity, potential racism, concerns, listening to employees and the public to better understand how to build a better system in partnership with all areas of this organization. Turning back to the first of the three topics that I mentioned that I said I would end on was the question around engaging with the community and broader dialogues around trust, accountability, transparency, and its interplay with an elected or appointed sheriff as a potential piece to that conversation. As the county attorney's office is here today, they can clean up anything or they can answer questions if you have them if I get something wrong. I'm not here to provide you with a legal brief today, but we have been meeting with the county attorney's office to fully discuss the various dynamics at play. And there are a number of different statutory areas as well as local charter provisions that come into play in ways that make this an important and complicated conversation to have. I want to cite those areas for you and for anyone else watching to be able to read them for yourself and be able to understand how they come together. Obviously, the Ramsey County Charter is one aspect of this conversation. It is like a local constitution of sorts for the county. Ramsey County is the only county in the state of Minnesota governed by a home rule charter. And so this means that in issues where the legislature is silent, the county generally has the ability to move forward and design ways that meet its local conditions using the charter as a vehicle for those conversations. Back in 2009, the Charter Commission with the public and the county board explored similar questions. I was not here at that time, and I don't want to speak too deeply into it, but we've been reviewing that 2009 material to see how the charter was looked at that time as a potential piece to this conversation. There are also three key areas in statute that have arisen that I just want to bring to your attention. 387.03 is the statutory area that describes the role of sheriff's offices in the state of Minnesota. 382.01 lays out the legislature's vision for elected offices that would include the sheriff's office. It also talks about other elected offices as well, and also then says these offices are elected unless modified via statute 375 section A, which lays out a path that can be exercised in local communities to move positions from elected to appointed or vice versa, appointed to elected. The bottom line from the initial review is the Ramsey County Board cannot make changes without the people of Ramsey County more broadly weighing in. And while there are different questions about the specific interrelationship between charter or statute, that part of the general community needing to weigh in, which was some of the initial conversation had here, is very clear through the looks of everything here, whether looking at the statutory pieces or the charter pieces. And the legal analysis will remain ongoing, but the broader question is less about the how changes could be made. And the part I wanted to come back and hear from you a little more today as we move forward was around the underpinning rationale for why changes remain important and what those dialogues might look like with the broader community. We heard you loud and clear say we want to hear from the community about what trust and accountability and transparency in a modern law enforcement agency as a part of an entire county of excellence in which all are valued and thrived means. We heard you say we need to have ways to listen to others before making decisions on the how we do or do not move forward in different areas. And yet we did not have a lot of time to hear back from the board last time about your thoughts on how you might like to establish that mechanism from more broadly hearing from the community. And so, Madam Chair, I'd like to turn it back, if possible, to you and any of your colleagues, if you have thoughts on how you would like us to begin to move down structuring those conversations so that the county board, the county sheriff, the citizens of Ramsey County, the residents of Ramsey County, that everyone can be a part of the broader piece to the conversation about trust, accountability, and transparency across all areas of our organization moving forward. With that, I will stand for any questions on any of the three elements and listen for any feedback you might have on next steps.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the report and feedback on work done to pursue the direction this board had indicated as we looked at the incident in the sheriff's office and any implications beyond. You have categorized this work in all three of the areas as work around trust, accountability, and transparency, whether the topic is in working with the sheriff or in working with the community or in working with an outside organization. All of that work is about trust, accountability, and transparency. And as we intend to give our feedback and guidance for your continued work today, I would like us to focus on that as you have shared with us. I'm looking at the screen and I do see a couple of hands that are up. Commissioner McDonough, then Commissioner Matas-Castillo, Commissioner Reinhardt. I believe I saw Commissioner Fretham. We'll go in that order, and I know that others may have comments yet. So, Commissioner McDonough.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I know Trista had her hand up much before me, so.
Oh. No, we can go to
I just want to be a little respectful there, and then I'd be ready to share my thoughts. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, because I'm not seeing on a list. So I'll go to Commissioner Matas-Castillo first, then Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you. And who says chivalry isn't dead, right? So thank you, Commissioner McDonough, and thank you, Madam Chair. I really like how the county manager laid out, what we really are intended to go, and that really is building trust, accountability, and transparency in all elected offices, and in this case, in particular, with our sheriff's department. And as we've talked about today and in weeks past about our racial equity work and our reform on justice systems, this all plays an incredible role. And so I think that we're now in a good place having the information of what might be possible, but that we're not at a place to decide what the ultimate outcome of that is without engaging with our community. We've done a very good job in other areas with engaging with community, from hearing from community either through our research work or other town halls, even in this time of COVID. And as Commissioner Reinhardt has pointed out several times, it's actually allowed us to engage more people who maybe hadn't been involved with us in conversations by having this multiple sources of online access. And so I would really, really like to encourage us to consider town halls, maybe even at a time culminating into a public hearing on this issue, so that we can get to really trust, accountability, and transparency through our justice system and in our sheriff's office, and that ultimately the community will help us decide, or as we hear from community, what that outcome might be, and that we don't settle on elected versus not elected, but really hear from community. I have, since I took office, I have said we need to have outside oversight on our law enforcement. I still believe that to be true. I think the community would support that, but let's hear from community about what that looks like, because in this conversation, the time is now to have a real conversation about what does policing in Ramsey County look like. I would also really like to encourage that as we think about town halls and community meetings, that we really also go deeply into our contracted cities to hear from those community members who are most immediately impacted by our law enforcement agency. Just as we're talking about police reform and the things that were passed at the Capitol, that applies to our sheriff's department and our law enforcement. And for those communities, this is their only law enforcement. enforcement. And so really going deep. I know the city of Falcon Heights have repeatedly requested an audience with the sheriff. I fully support that. I encourage the sheriff to meet with Falcon Heights and the other contracted cities to hear from them. But let's do it in partnership. Let us join that conversation as well. I would also like to invite the members of the Charter Commission to come and hear the same things that we are hearing from the community, so that as we move forward, we're kind of all working from the same amount of information and data that comes from the community, so that we can have a conversation. Let's put politics aside, let's put a campaign aside, and let's go deep in community engagement in partnership with law enforcement, with our communities and our Charter Commission, so that when we have all the information, we can make really good decisions. So I would like us to start there, not with what the end solution is, but on a path to really get engagement about what accountability, transparency, and trust really can look like with oversight. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner. And I believe Commissioner Reinhardt would be next, or Commissioner Fretham. I forget which one I said. Let me go to Commissioner Reinhardt.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, let's try this. It's Commissioner McDonough, then me, then Commissioner Fretham. Okay? We'll just monitor it. So it is Commissioner McDonough's turn, and then I will follow him.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I forgot all about you, Commissioner McDonough. Thank you very much, Commissioner Reinhardt.
All right,
Commissioner
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to start with number 3, the human rights investigation. I appreciate the work that's gone on with you, Ryan, and Tony, in the conversations you've had with the commissioner. I fully support us to play this all the way out. I believe that we need this, whatever this looks like, whether, working with recommendations from the commissioner or directly with the Human Rights Office. We need this outside look, and that is definitely about transparency and accountability. And so I support that, and for us to play that out all the way to the end. On number 2, on the work that we're doing with human resources, on what that position would look like, I fully support that. And I really do think, and this is a challenge to the sheriff, not hopefully not a challenge here about how do we actually demonstrate that our words mean something, right? I continue to hear Sheriff Fletcher talk about his willingness to partner, his true desire to be able to work together. And I think, working with us on this piece here really can go a long ways in demonstrating that walking the talk really matters, and making this a sustainable thing, that it isn't about individuals, it's about how we work together between a sheriff's office and the county board and the county, and how do we function. And it doesn't matter who's in my seat, it doesn't matter who's in the sheriff's seat, it doesn't matter who's in Ryan's seat or in Scott's seat, that we've got a process that actually helps bring together these various pieces here to work on a common mission, as you said, Ryan. So I fully support us to continue to work on that. And then on the we got a lot of response, from our, in particular, maybe my comments from last time. And, I did raise the issue about, appointed versus selected, but this has never really been about, that's not the core issue here. The core issue is how do you actually function with transparency, accountability, and working together on a common mission within an organization under the current situation, or what structure, or what does a structure look like going forward that could maybe do that in a better way. And certainly the uniquenesses here of 2 other elected officials, and I don't, it's not just the sheriff, the county attorney, and what that looks like and how it works. I've gotten a lot of feedback since that meeting, and it's interesting. The community continues to put pressure, on me, and I know many of you, and even us as a board, to hold the sheriff, these other 2 elected offices accountable. They expect that that's how this works, right? As the county board, as the governing board for this county, they expect how this works. they don't understand is the statutory authorities and what's in place for the actual structure and how that actually intersects and how we can actually hold individuals accountable who are sitting in the sheriff's office or sitting in the county attorney's office. And that really does come down to, at least in the past, a willingness of individuals to want to put their best foot forward. You know, they're better angels here to actually want to do that. And that's, you know, I think even, you know, I mentioned last time, I've been through 3 sheriffs, right? And each one has a different vision about what that looks like. And it even drives more confusion, I think, to the public, right? Because each one has chosen to work with or work against or work independently in different ways. And the public has seen really good examples, I think, of things working really well and common goals and work around racial equity and stuff, and those things working together really well. And they tend to think that it's us that are not holding individuals accountable when they're not seeing that, when the reality is the statute really does give the independence of those offices so much authority for them to choose what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And so having a conversation with community is going to be extremely important here. I think, you know, the community really needs to, you know, as a part of that, have a chance to use their voice to talk about the accountability piece, the transparency piece that concerns them, that I hear about, that each one of us hear about, that our staff hear about. They need a public place to be able to share that in a way that is structured. And I think that's going to be really important. I think it's, you know, the value there is going to be moving forward is the sheriff needs to hear this too, right? He needs to understand, you know, the importance of and what the community is expecting, not only of him, but as us as elected officials and as Ryan and Scott as management, that how we work together. And then moving forward, can we come up with a better structure that survives us? It's not about personalities. It's not about individuals. But it's really a structure. The structure of the independent sheriff really truly goes back to the sheriff of Nottingham and England and for coming over here. And there really has not been a lot of adjustment on that. There's been a lot of status quo protection and a lot of turf protection over the years every time that gets talked about. And can we use this as an opportunity to move past the turf protection, move past the status quo protection, to really take a look at, is there a structure that actually provides that true accountability, that true transparency, that platform for us to work together, one mission, one county, one door, in the way that still potentially provides an opportunity for an elected sheriff and having that opportunity for the residents to be able to pick their sheriff, right? But picking that sheriff in a way that aligns with 7 other electeds that they also pick, right? To drive policy, to drive and set the tone for this county and that expectation that we're working together. So I fully support this community process. I fully support and commit to being a part of that in any way that can be helpful here and having these healthy conversations within our community. And I truly hope the sheriff takes a look at this and it really is an attempt to hold healthy, beneficial conversations to the same people that elect me, elect each and every one of us on this board, and also elect him. And to be able to do better for each and every single one of them, working with Ryan and his team through a service team model that has proven to be so beneficial to us in this county, to be able to integrate the work that we do. The potential here is unlimited, and I know we can do better than what we've been able to do. So I support all of this. I support, Trista's comments there and how we're going to be moving forward. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Ryan, for the work you and your team have done to bring this back for the conversation for us to have as a board.
Thank you, Commissioner, and Commissioner Reinhardt, for your grace in not allowing me to pass over Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. Well, you know, although this conversation started because of an incident, this time the conversation started because of an incident, I would hope that this doesn't evolve to just being about that. In fact, I know we know that it isn't, but I hope that when it comes especially in the reporting that will come out in the paper, that this isn't just about, in fact, it's not just, I mean, it isn't about elected versus appointed. It's about the trust, transparency, and accountability that goes forward, and how that can be done. Because whether it's appointed or elected isn't going to be, assuming that the public decided that when they voted on this, because that's an important part here also. I'm going to back up just a little bit. We don't get to decide. The county board doesn't get to decide. We have the public engagement, and if we can, and through the Charter Commission and different processes, figure out whether or not it goes on to the ballot. Ultimately, the people will vote on this if it is going to be changed. And so this isn't, because I think there is a misperception that somehow the county board can make this decision. That's simply not true. So, there is a process in statute as was described by the county manager, but that's what the process is. So getting community engagement is to have a discussion about what it is that we want to accomplish. And it's, again, not about just one form of governance or another, but what do we want to accomplish under either scenario? Because we really need to have willing partners, obviously, but moving forward, we need to know where we're at right now so that we have a baseline. I mean, when you look at across the nation, the scrutiny now that's coming to public safety, well, why wouldn't we want to do that? Because I would assume that a majority of the folks that we have in those positions by far want the same things that we do. And that is, we want to make sure that we have public safety, that we do it in a racially equitable way. That's one of the biggest issues right now, is that it hasn't been. But that doesn't mean that every individual that's involved in law enforcement, who put their lives on the line every day, and we respect that, necessarily holds all those same values. So better to look at it and have an objective outside understanding of where are we at. That's when we can take positive action on what do we need to change. And the transparency, the accountability, the trust, that's all part of finding out where are we at right now. And so I hope that this doesn't come out as, and it could be, I hope it doesn't come out as this is all about, do we like the current sheriff or don't we? That's really it's inconsequential to me, because it's not about what the current sheriff did. As was pointed out, there's been other issues, and it wasn't just with Sheriff Fletcher. Let's just figure out where we're at. Let's do it together. Let's make sure that we get that trust built back up, because I think that everybody, again, whether they're in law enforcement or not, really wants to have that trust within our community to move forward in very positive ways and to deal with racism and to deal with some of the other injustices that are out there. So to me, County Manager O'Connor asked this is the how, but why? Well, the why is about, and the most important thing, is about making sure that we have the trust, accountability, and transparency that we expect from every elected official and appointed official as far as that goes. So making sure that we bring that message forward, that's what we're here about. An incident brought it more to the forefront, got it. But that's not what this is about. That's not what this discussion is about. It is about having an open community conversation and then letting the people decide if it comes forward for a vote to change it, then the people will decide that as well. What do they want and how can they get there? And most importantly, what is expected of that person, whether they are appointed or whether they are elected, and never to lose sight of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Fretham.
Thank you, Chair Carter. Commissioner McDonough, I just want to thank you for clarifying and bringing it back to the point that this is more than just one sheriff or one board. It makes for a much more exciting headline when it is county board versus the sheriff. But as I tried to point out a few times during the last discussion, this is really an incident that happened to occur in a moment where we were already having a national discussion about where does policing fit in our comprehensive system of public safety. And as you also very astutely mentioned, our system of sheriffs and electing sheriffs harkens back to 1600s England, and it's been sort of floated along in the status quo. And it's not unreasonable to ask, as we talk about accountability to the community in policing, whether this is still working for us. And I've had constituents very angry that I would even ask this question. In the same moment where I've had constituents, like all of my colleagues, saying, why aren't you doing anything when the sheriff is doing these things that I disagree with? And I can continue to refer them to the sheriff to ask him these questions. But it sounds like to me that the community is asking, should we be doing something different? And it is my responsibility to ask this question. And the same constituent that was angry with me was incorrect in stating that the Constitution mandates that sheriffs are elected. That's not true. We could do something different, and we are not limited in our choices between elected or appointed. We could come up with something different, something that really elevates community voice, that preserves people's options to vote. I was able to, in my efforts to better understand and investigate this issue, I had a conversation with Professor David Schultz from Hamline University earlier last week. And one thought he had was looking at how Missouri does their judicial appointments, which is a judicial selection committee, and setting some strong standards of what is expected. They appoint their judges, and then people have the chance to vote on removal if they don't like the people that are appointed. It is a way to ensure that we maintain a professional sheriff standards that are selected by the community, not by us, and that the community, the entire community, then gets a chance to vote on that. So there are options. There are ways to ensure accountability, transparency, and the people's voice in this entire process. So I think we need to stop making this a fight and a dichotomy and make this a discussion about what it is we want. And it needs to be a discussion that embeds policing within the larger system of comprehensive public safety, because we know that that doesn't exist in a vacuum, that it's just not one piece. And I also want to thank Commissioner Manis-Castillo for bringing up the topic of contract cities. As someone who lives in one of those contract cities, I know that I have benefited from the very safe community that I have here that is partially due from the sheriff and our current sheriff, Fletcher. I appreciate it, but I also know that the safety that I experience may not be the experience that some of my neighbors have, because they don't have my white skin and my Norwegian last name. So recognizing that and an understanding that that discussion, like all of our discussions, needs to recognize that the experiences we have might not be the experiences that everyone in our community has. So that discussion of comprehensive public safety has to be inclusive and recognizing what we talked about in the earlier discussion of racism as a public health crisis and one that impacts this system as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I realize that there are others who have their hands up now. I should check in with Commissioner Ortega. Also, if you had tried to put your name in the participant list, that is okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yes, I just want to echo my support to move forward. I think it's important that we have total accountability and transparency, especially during crises like COVID-19. The question is, we should be one county with all the pieces working together. And I think that's critical and important. As Jim stated, regardless of what who is the sheriff and who sits on the board, there has to be clear understanding what the role of the board is, especially during emergencies, as we establish policies and how we all going to make that happen as we move forward. The last thing, Madam Chair, I did have a report, but I see that I'm down to 2% on my iPad, and for some reason it is not recharging.
All right.
So
We haven't
if you
gotten to that
lose me,
point.
if you
All right,
lose me, you know why. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know we're running short of time, so we'll finish this discussion and then go to reports. Commissioner McGuire and then Commissioner McDonough, I think I saw your hand again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll be brief because my colleagues have been so thorough and eloquent in their discussion of this, and I'm really glad we're having this discussion. I, as well as my colleagues, have heard from the members of the public that some have said, why don't you do something about what the sheriff is doing? And others have said, don't do anything, he's elected. And so the public is wanting to weigh in on this, and so I totally support having the public engagement on this. If we decide to have a public hearing, I'm supportive of that. I love that Commissioner Fretham has offered some hybrid options, that we should be thinking outside the box on whatever we do. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. I've always supported retention elections in our judge selections, and definitely we could look at that. But just wanted to say how supportive I am of having these community conversations around this issue. And we've all said it, that trust, accountability, and transparency is something that our residents require of us, we require of ourselves, and we should require of all of everyone that works in Ramsey County. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Commissioner McDonough, and then we'll be wrapping up this conversation. I don't see other hands. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to call out and recognize that this can work when we actually come to the table with the best interest of residents and using all the information. We have 29 elected judges in this county, and there was a 1920 statute that was getting in the way of us being able to work really well together. And it was difficult. And, we sat down at the table to have a conversation about, is there a better way to move forward? What are your interests? What are your priorities as a bench and as independently elected bench? What are your priorities as a county board in the county, and how we work together through corrections? And what can that look like moving forward, rather than basing it on a 1920 statute that no longer worked? And we were able to come together. It took some time, and it took a lot of hard work, and Victoria shaking her head and smiling, and she was a part of that for 2 years, I think. But we ended up having an MOU, and we actually went together, bench and county board, to the legislature to actually implement statute change to be able to provide a better format and structure moving forward in that relationship between the bench and the county board. So I call that out because we've done it, and hopefully everybody can step up here moving forward, including the sheriff. And, at some point we maybe have to have a conversation with the county attorney. Is there something, we've got a great relationship for him, but does that mean we leave him alone on accountability, transparency, and trust? No, he does a lot of that on his own. But how do we make sure, as we're having these conversations, there's a structure built in, again, no matter who sits in those chairs, that the residents can expect that same accountability, trust, and transparency moving forward. So thanks, Madam Chair, for letting me extend this a little bit more, but I just wanted to remind us, we've done this in the past, and I believe we can do this in the future here.
Thank you, and thanks for all of your thinking as we provide additional thoughts for the county manager in continuing to abide by the direction we set toward these 3 areas of action. Again, we're taking an outside look. We're working with the sheriff on trust and accountability and a potential role within the sheriff's office aligned with our county board's vision, mission, goals, our values. And we are also designing a process for working with community. We have partnership that we need to continue to build with the sheriff, with our community, and with others around this, and in bringing in those areas of community that we've been working with, including, of course, the Charter Commission to listen with us as we hear the input of community, but also reflecting that we have good community organizations that are embedding the voices currently in our TST or Transforming Systems Together work and in our Equity Action Circle with our Racial Equity and Community Engagement Response Team. You know, those potentially are areas where we can go to help design the conversation. You know, not simply to invite, but to help design the conversation. So I would challenge us to look at how we go into a design that embeds that kind of input upfront and that looks to organize our thoughts around where we want to end up. You know, what is the process that we're going through, and how do we in fact then utilize the information that we're gathering from community? Where on the continuum for engagement does this fit, etc. I don't believe that we need to be prescriptive today, but that you have heard, County Manager, the input and good consensus around our desire to design those processes for continuing the exploration of outside work that can be done with us in alignment with our procurement processes, you know, continue the examination of the position that we are looking for, and also to continue the design, or begin the design, I should say, of a process that will engage community at the front and in the process of allowing us to decisions about organization based on the input of community. Are there any additional questions or any additional pieces that you need? I'll turn to Ryan for your thoughts and conclusion.
No, Madam Chair. Thank you for the feedback and allowing me to outsource today's county connections back to all of you to help share thoughts with me. We will follow up based on the feedback today. Heard you loud and clear on the trust, accountability, transparency, the idea of town halls, potentially a public hearing, how to make sure we're hearing from contracted cities, inviting commission members from the Charter Commission, as well as the Sheriff's Office and the County Attorney's Office to be a part of that design and process of listening as we go forward to move beyond the status quo. We will work on a full proposal around those lines that we will share back with you in the weeks ahead. And in the meantime, this was exactly the feedback that we needed from the board. Thank you very much, and that concludes my County Connections for today.
Thank you very much also. I know that we are just about at noon, and we're at a point where we've had feedback or reports back from commissioners. I'm going to just double check with the county manager. Are we able to stay on beyond noon? I think we are.
Madam Chair, I'll look to the chief clerk in case she knows something more specific.
To stay on?
Yeah.
Yes, I think we can.
We are okay, Madam Chair, as far as we know.
Thank you very much. And so we are going to begin our county commissioner reports with Commissioner Montes-Castillo.
I would go for Commissioner Ortega first, since his battery's about to die.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
You guys are so considerate of each other. Thank you. Commissioner Ortega, did you get another battery, or just go ahead?
You're on mute, Raphael.
No, I just think that my iPad is so old that it doesn't recharge very quickly. I'm down to 1%. Anyway, I just wanted to quickly report a couple of things, and that is with the Riverview Corridor, we have the committee, the staff, and the committee has been reviewing 4 RFPs for preliminary engineering, cultural resource work, communications, and community engagement, etc. Those will be coming to the board sometime, hopefully by the beginning of September for approval. The other is that, and I'll report next week, we've really worked hard to terms of the food distribution committee we went to a second round of RFPs, really working hard to reach out and reach deep into the community so we can provide those resources countywide. That'll be it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Ortega. And so now I'll bounce back up then to Commissioner Manis-Castillo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As we moved earlier funds to address our issues on homelessness, I also wanted to share, as you've seen in the news, that the city of Minneapolis and the Parks Board changed their rules around encampments. And so people have been moved out of the parks to make smaller encampments. And so in that process, we have seen a rise in the number of people living outside here in St. Paul and in Ramsey County. There's people moving around. As we know, this population is transient. They're looking for safe places to be. Last week, we experienced a pretty big jump in our number of people sleeping outside, specifically around the Cathedral Hill area. And so I just want you to know that our staff and our outreach team are working extensively to connect resources with folks there. If people are experiencing homelessness, the best way still is to go through our coordinated entry so that we can get them on appropriate lists and set up for resources. So our staff is working very hard to address those. They're exhausted, they're tired, but they are committed to this work. And so I just want to give a special shout out to our homeless outreach team and our leadership that are working on this issue. It continues to grow. It will continue to grow. We are looking ahead, not just in this immediate day-to-day, but also thinking about, you know, even though it feels hot outside right now, winter is coming very quickly. And so we are really looking to what are those longer term solutions as we move forward in this work. So, and appreciate the partnerships with the city and our law enforcement as well as we address this issue. A couple other things, we have been working in coordination with our office along with Councilmember Amy Brenmoen and Councilmember Dai Tao and our Healing Streets initiative around the increased violence and gun violence in our communities and throughout the district. We've had a tremendous spike, as you know, in the number of incidences involving guns and the number of homicides. And so we have been working and are working weekly to really think about what are our approaches? How do we take proactive efforts to make our community safer? And so we have been working very diligently in partnership with law enforcement. We had a meeting last week with Healing Streets and our local St. Paul PD that really shared that they really believe fully in our Healing Streets initiative and that partnership is incredibly important as we move forward, that it is not an issue that law enforcement alone can address or fix, but that it really is going to take all of us working in collaboration. And so it was really affirming in the direction of the work that we are doing to address violence in our communities. We had a march through the North End with Guns Down, Love Up, which was really well attended, and folks really thinking about how do we take the space from a healing perspective through positive energy and engagement with community to really make our community safer. And so there's tremendous work going forward. We have a long road ahead as we address these issues, which, as you know, just the gun violence is just one tiny piece of the bigger puzzle. And so we're taking truly a holistic approach about resourcing community, engaging community, reducing the number of guns, providing alternatives, providing jobs and housing, and really taking a holistic approach and just value the partnerships across municipalities and with law enforcement as we do that. Also had a really great meeting this week with the Rice Lavender Coalition as we move through creating a circular economy in the Rice Lavender area, which is really thinking about how, based on the strengths of the community and how people are already working, how do we share that So thinking about, for instance, the Rice Street Gardens, which, as we know, tomatoes are about to come into ripe, and everybody will be trying to get rid of excess tomatoes. But how do we then share that with our food distribution or with community members who might need additional food? And so as we think about the harvest, how do we share that? How do we then invest and engage folks to teach them how to preserve excess food as we redistribute? How do we work with the thrift store to teach people how to use goods there in the spirit of reduction of waste, but to repair and mend or recreate and upcycle to really help the community prosper? And so we have engaged in this partnership through the Rice Lavender Coalition, but really as a partnership with our Ramsey County Recycling and Energy Group and our community outreach, which, as we all invested and voted to continue to invest our dollars to community in this reduction of waste, that investment and that pilot is happening at the Rice Lavender Coalition. So really exciting stuff happening. The community is really engaged. In fact, we very quickly had someone step up and say, we want to open a bike repair shop that would help repair the bikes that get donated to the thrift store and elsewhere, to allow the community to then have bikes and then use them with trailers or carts to haul the harvest to redistribute food. So it's this great synergistic endeavor that's very exciting, and so good things yet to come on the Rice Lavender Coalition and our circular economy investment. Moving ahead. With that, I will stand. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Matas-Castillo. I'm going alphabetically around and back up to Commissioner Fredham. I'll start with Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you. So I'll just.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. I was going to Commissioner McDonough and back around to you, Commissioner.
Okay, gotcha.
Commissioner McDonough.
Don't mute yourself, Nicole, because I have no report. You're up.
Okay, and so actually, next alphabetically is Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will just talk a little bit about all of our communities that are stepping up. I mean, we've been thanking our staff, and we couldn't obviously do all the work that's happening without our amazing staff and our community and partners that have been really stepping up. And I'll just say that Commissioner Fretham did a great job at the Ramsey County League of Local Governments. This is 2 weeks ago now, but we didn't give a report last week. So on her committee, and I'll let her say any more about that. But it was a great meeting with our city partners, and I think it's a good start in the work that we can do potentially with that organization. So thanks to Commissioner Fretham on that. Also, we had our Roseville schools are doing listening sessions on racism as a public health issue, and so our communities are really stepping up to that. Keystone Communities did a food distribution at Roseville Area High School last week, thanks to Surly Brewing volunteers who were really stepped up, and they served a lot of boxes of food to people that needed it in the Roseville area. And so just thanks to everyone who's stepping up on these issues. Just wanted to give a heads up that the NACO elections, our National Association of Counties, had their elections yesterday, and we have a new second vice president of Denise Winfrey. I know many of us were on that call. And it was our first virtual business meeting in history of NACO, and so that was good. And I just want to say that as chair of Healthy Counties for NACO, I'm still the chair until we pass over to the next chair at our next meeting. But at our next meeting, which will be in 2 weeks, we are having a meeting on racism as a public health crisis. So nationwide, we're going to be hearing from people that are working on that issue. I'll be giving a slight little report, just telling them what we're doing on it. But basically, we're going to be hearing from counties around that are working on racism as a public health issue. So I know Commissioner Reinhardt thinks we should bring it to NACO, and we should. And we are, and we should continue to do that. And as well as AMC, we should be bringing that to our state and federal associations. So thank you for that, Madam Chair. And I will end my report with that.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McGuire. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. Well, I agree with the things that have been going on, and I think we've talked a little bit about some of the meetings that we've been in, and it's been really enlightening to be part of those bigger discussions and involving the community. I will have my We Count shirt for the 2020 census up until we are done with the 2020 census, but I'm really happy to report that Ramsey County has 75.1% self-reporting rate. Minnesota is #1 in the country with 71.1, I believe it is, and St. Paul is 4th in the country of communities of its size. So we are doing well, but there's more that's coming. There's a lot of outreach that's happening. There's going to be contact by those that have not reported the self-reporting, which is in the past anyhow been done door to door. Some of that will be done by phone, but there are many different ways for people to still participate in the self-reporting. You can go to the website, but you can also call, and you can do it over the phone. There are different ways to do it. Then there are protections in place as far as making sure that people are counted where they need to be counted and so forth. I just really encourage people to participate in that. As we all know, funding and representation and much more really depends on having an accurate count. Again, knowing what the facts are and moving forward with that. So I hope that everyone participates, and we'll keep this going. It's been extended, obviously, because of COVID, when it's to be completed. And I believe at this point it's at the end of October, but I'd have to double check that. So that is my report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt. And back to Commissioner Fretham.
Thank you, Chair Carter. Yes, I'll just mention and thank Commissioner McGuire for suggesting Ramsey County League of Local Governments. We brought an update of the work we've been doing on the Policy Action Group Subcommittee on Financial Implications to the Ramsey County League of Local Governments to share a draft of the toolkit and then an update on the themes and a summary of the financial implications that our smaller subcommittee had identified to kind of validate that against the broader experiences of the additional cities and school districts that were present at the league meeting and get their feedback on what would be helpful to them. Got some great feedback on our toolkit and some additional measures that would be useful to them. Additional support for the idea of coordination. So thank you to Ryan and to Alex, our CFO, on being very proactive and putting forward that meeting with the city administrators to talk about opportunities for coordination. I think one of the big pieces of feedback we heard was just the value in being transparent and the value in showing our communities and our constituents on how we are really working together to try to be efficient. And as much as possible, we know we don't want to leave any dollars on the table, and we won't, because dollars that don't get spent go to the hospitals that need it, but also as much as possible if we're not duplicating administration and spending funding that way, but we're really getting it in the hands of the community right away to offset the financial hardships that businesses and families are facing. That's most important. And then as well, over the weekend, as Commissioner McGuire mentioned, the really disgusting incident in Roseville with the family whose Black Lives Matter sign was vandalized with dead raccoons. The community organized very quickly to have a march on rejecting racism, and the community showed up. I was really happy to be there and show up with the neighboring community of Roseville and to join my state representative, Jamie Becker-Finn, and Representative Kelly Moeller, who represents much of my area in District 1, Roseville Area School Board Member Curtis Johnson, St. Paul Public School Board Member Chantel Allen, Roseville City Council Member Wayne Groff, a couple of Roseville City Council candidates, and then Roseville School Superintendent Aldo Sicoli, who were all there present, marching with the community. It was a really powerful day, powerful speeches, and moving to be there and show up and to support this family who had been terrorized a bit, for showing their support and showing up with the community members who shared their own experiences of racism in the community. So we will continue to show up. That our support and gathering has not stopped. So and it's not stopping in the suburbs. So it was an exciting weekend for us, and glad to continue the work here today. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Fretham. Finally, huh? I will just share a few things from this past couple of weeks. Also, I know that Commissioner Reinhardt was there, and I think also Commissioner Fretham may have been at the Ramsey County Care Center Parade, which we have not reported on, but it was a good opportunity to wave hello and to give encouragement to Care Center residents and also to our staff who have been enduring quite a bit during COVID-19, including, of course, an outbreak and some losses at the Care Center. They were enthusiastic and welcoming as we drove through. It's a rainy day, so we weren't quite as able to keep the windows down during the whole process, but I'm sure they appreciated it for being there. We also have been doing a lot of work around reform in Ramsey County, and all of the discussions that we've had today, certainly lift up the work that has been going on. In the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, we have been in discussions with our partners regarding reforming our justice system, and that work has continued with a meeting this past week and is ongoing, as it is in our Ramsey County Learning Community, which has been led by the Burns Institute, and together, as in the CJCC, with community there, we are lifting up the conversation about reforming the justice system, about building greater prevention and restorative justice focus. Recent meeting of that team broke out into committees which are exploring specific actions to do just that, and that work is ongoing as well. I did attend a National Association of Counties board meeting this past week, at which we voted on extended resolutions, reviewed the year, and extended those resolutions, which had been passed at the National Association's last summer conference in 2019 and at the legislative conference this past winter, so that they are still in effect, and also prepared emergency resolutions, which we had not had the opportunity, of course, to act on. At the annual meeting, which has already been mentioned, we did say goodbye to the president, Mary Ann Borgeson, whose year has been incredible and remarkable, both professionally and personally. Welcomed or thanked her for the work that she has done, and elected Gary Moore from Kentucky as our new president, and Larry Johnson from Texas as second vice president, and Commissioner McGuire already mentioned Denise Winfrey as our second vice president. So that concludes my report for today. I will say that we have a balance of the summer and fall coming up with a huge amount of activity. Our meetings will be extended. We do have workshops continuing throughout the summer, and of course we are guiding toward our budget process. And I say thank you so much again to all of the commissioners for your flexibility and for your endurance of these as we transition into a more regular presence. And what I mean is into a current status of meetings online and workshops online, engaging those staff members as we need to, and even providing for community engagement in these meetings. We will continue to grow our ability and our actuality of getting this work done and getting it done well, of having the meetings such as we are accustomed to, not just in the morning, extending into the afternoon as well. And you'll see the calendar that you will be able to review and plan forward we've been able to get other things done in the afternoons. And I would encourage you to prepare yourselves to know that we will have busy board afternoons. And so you may need to look at your schedule and adjust other things as they have been planned. I want to say thank you again for the conversation input and the thoughtful participation that you've had, especially in giving guidance to our county manager to continue to work on our behalf and to our entire staff. Thank you to all. And at this point then, if there is some further conversation, and it does not appear there is, we are adjourned.
Right. Thanks all. Have a
Thanks.
good day.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Know that literally every business in our community is struggling right now. Every business, and our small businesses are